Okay, we're live. Welcome to the live stream from March 21st, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It goes for about 3 hours. So if you missed yesterday, Angie and I were supposed to go live. She got caught up at the DMV. So Angie and I are going to go live tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So here on my channel. So hopefully you guys can make it then as well. We have Angelique, Alcuda Babe, Leslie, Soccer Mom, new Chris is here. Welcome, welcome. Cool. Sassy Little Frassy says, hey, I loved the Tuesday stream. Cool. Yeah. It's always fun. I tell you, the 1 hour live streams go by so much quicker, obviously, than the 3 hour ones. And it goes so much quicker for me when I have Angie here. Oh my gosh. It's so nice having somebody else here. So I don't know. Be nice if I could do more of those, I think. So lots of more people hopping on. Dora says, hi, Dana. It's been a long time. I'm doing great. Thank you for all your help and support. You are so welcome. And it's awesome to hear that you're doing so well. Very cool. So before we get going, let me just share the latest update. If you guys remember, I was saying I'm working on a journal called the Insight Journal. And I have spent so much time and energy on this journal. It blows my mind when I think about how much time I flippin' spent on this thing. I've spent probably as much time writing a full-size book as I've spent on a journal, which is shocking to me. I didn't think it would be like this much of a process, but it is. So anyways, I got my author proof of the book. Oh, let me set my timer. Forgot to do that. I got the author proof of the book in the mail today, which is super exciting. But I realized I must have measured wrong because it is huge. So I'm going to have to go back and get it reformatted and do some more edits and stuff on it. But I thought I would just show you guys what it looks like so far. And then hopefully the final copy will be done, I'm going to say probably in about 3 weeks. So that's super exciting. But here is like the rough draft, solid working rough draft so far. And this this is big. This is like a textbook. It's really big. And the final copy, this is 7x10, just so you know. And the one I think I'm going to end up doing, I'm meeting with the formatter tomorrow, but I'm thinking we're going to go 5x8. So it'll be, where's my book? This is my first book that I did. This is 5x8. So it's going to be significantly smaller. So we're just going to edit everything way down. And I wanted to do a 5-year journal, but I think it's not going to give people enough room to write in. So we're going to, I think, make it into a 3-year journal and then just take off the 2 years. So what this journal is going to have in it, it's going to be very similar to this. We're going to add some little, there's so many edits that I want to make, like little flourishy embellishment kind of things between each year. But every day has a different question that's designed to help people get insight. So, for example, March 23rd, the question is, what has been the best or worst what has been the best or worst use of your time lately and why? And then each day also gives space for people to write down, like, what was a notable or aha moment from today and why? And then let me flip to another day. April 5th is what made you smile today and why? And then every 7 days, there's a repeating question that asks, what are a few of the more notable moments from this past week? And in what ways, if any, will this change how you approach things moving forward? Here's another question. In what ways are you a friend or an enemy to yourself? And another question here, June 15th is, what are 2 lessons you learned from your last painful experience? Let's see. Oh, I need to edit that question because it has 5-year time frame in it. I'm going to have to change that if I'm going to make this to a 3-year journal. Let's see. And then peppered in here is, how are you feeling right now and why? September 22nd is, what was the last good thing to happen to you and why was it good? Let's see. And then there's mandalas and quotes peppered in here. So all of the quotes are from me. And then the mandalas are ones that you can color. So they're all going to be a pretty decent, they'll actually be the same size as even in the 5x8. So it'll be fun. Like I had so much fun coming up with these questions, even though it was almost torturous to try to come up with like 300 something questions that were really thought provoking like this, but it was fun. Here's another one. November 9th. What was the last creative thing you did and what did you enjoy about it? May 5th. What was the last dream or nightmare you had that you can remember? What message do you think it was trying to tell you? And then May 6th was, when was the last time you had fun and what did you do? March 27th is, when was the last time you got angry? What happened and how did you calm yourself down? So there's just tons and tons of questions in here. I'm super excited about it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to keep this book for me and work through it. But hopefully I'll have a really good book for you guys here, like within the next month. Yeah, it's fun. Anti J Pug says, "Oh, great, a journal coloring book." Yeah, it's super fun. And it's so interesting too, to be able to get insight and feedback from other people. So I've been asking other people, it's just amazing the stuff that other people pick up on, you know, like I was showing this book to some friends today and everybody had totally different feedback. And it was all awesome feedback on the size of the journal. Travis insists that and he's right. I like this suggestion to put a mandala page before the very first page of the journal. So then the formatter had some more input. So I thought we were done, but no, we've got still so many things to tweak on this book. And what am I not saying your name right? Anti J Pug says, I like the way that you say my YouTube name, Dana. How how else do you say it? Now I'm wondering what I'm missing. Okay, let me scroll up. Dandelion says, I'm looking forward to this book. I am too. I think it's gonna be fun. And I think what I'm gonna do too is gonna try to see if I can turn a lot of these questions into like memes, like stuff I can post on Instagram. Cause I think it would be fun for the ones that aren't like, I don't know. I mean, the questions are personal, but they're not like super personal, you know, like you can answer them online and I don't think it would be like super weird or anything. So I think it would be fun for me to post them on my Instagram account and just kind of see what people come up with and see what people come up with as a community. I think will be fun. So. Tanitria, wow. Tanitria says, I've been speaking with my ex-husband, his new wife. She really wanted to know about the truth and the lies. It's unbelievable how many times he cheated on me. I know I made the right decision. Yeah. Sometimes that validation is just huge, just finding out more pieces of the puzzle. But yeah, you don't need that. Like that, you're right. Like you made the right decision. That stuff's not workable. Alcuda Babe says, is your journal going to be a book? And then she says, and I answered my own question. Yeah, it'll be available on Amazon and through Barnes and Noble and kind of through some other retailers. here as soon as it's out. So it'll be fun. Bonnie says, you and Angie are great together. Well, thank you. She's really easy to work with and to have a conversation with. We were joking the other day, and this might actually turn into a real thing. I don't even know how it came up, but something about we should just rent an RV and do talks, like start speaking because she lives about, what did I figure, about 7 hours from me. So she's in St. Louis, I'm in Michigan. And so we were thinking like it'd be really fun to rent an RV and then just kind of tool around the US. And she's like, yeah, we could do that. We could just live stream. I'm like, oh my God, that would be so much fun. So I don't know, maybe that'll end up happening. I don't know if her husband would appreciate being left with 3 children, but it would be fun. Very cool. James says, I'm doing better every day. I'm learning to love myself and stop the negative thoughts and putting myself first. Very cool. You know, one of the last questions from the live stream on Tuesday, I think it was from a gal named Jennifer, and we were talking about self-love and learning to tune into your intuition and kind of what that means. And she was asking for some kind of different input on how do you even start doing that? How do you even start tuning into your emotions and all of that? And so then the stream ended and then the chat kept going. And then I saw she'd asked the question, which I thought was such a valid question, of what does it even really mean to love yourself? And I know we've gone through this before, but just for the sake of some new people on tonight, I think that's something that so many people struggle with. They hear that concept of loving yourself and they're like, what does that even mean? Like that term just sounds so fluffy and, what does that mean? And I'm a big fan of replace the word love with value. So instead of thinking about, okay, I need to love myself, what does it mean to value yourself? And that changes your relationship with everything, with the food you eat, the exercise you get, the people you hang out with, the hobbies that you have, how you treat yourself as a whole. If you can value yourself, sometimes that might mean going to bed early, or sometimes it might mean staying up late, or being in a different environment, or maybe it's time to start looking for another job, or just how you interact with your environment as a whole and how you just take care of yourself as a whole. So if anybody is confused about the whole concept of self-love, I think that's a really great start, is just to think about it in terms of valuing yourself. Loving yourself equals valuing yourself. And I'd used the example before of, think about a person that has a classic car and how they value it. They love that car. If you've got like a 1965 Mustang in top condition, you've got that car either probably garaged, right? And people that have these classic cars, they're out there every other weekend waxing them, they're washing them, they put time and energy and effort into them. That's just their baby. That's their prize thing. And they value that car with everything that they have. And so loving ourselves the same way, like taking the time to just be so good to ourselves. It's important. Yes, James says yes, respecting yourself and your thoughts. Kevin says, I still struggle with gray rock and accepting that there is no way to quote unquote win. Yeah, well, I would say you could make the argument that going gray rock is winning, but I totally get where you're coming from, where it's frustrating that you realize, okay, I just cannot get through to this other person and this conversation's not going to go anywhere and they're not going to come around. Like they just have 2 feet planted in their kind of twisted version of reality, and it's incredibly frustrating. Pink Pixie asks, Dana, can you or Angie make videos for nightmares like this? I dread sleeping. I stay awake until I can't anymore. I can talk to her about it. Is there anything in particular that you were thinking as far as a video? I did make, maybe somebody can link to it. I made a video a while back. It's on YouTube. If you search for affirmations for PTSD, it'll come up. And the image is like I think one candle or a series of candles. That video, it's 8 hours. Actually, there's two versions of it out there. There's a shorter version and there's a longer version. The longer version is 8 hours. And the first, I think, maybe 20 minutes or so is just positive affirmations designed to get a person to calm down. If that doesn't do the trick, or if that's kind of not what you're looking for, there's a couple other YouTubers out there that you might really like. There's Michael Seeley and Jason Stevenson, and they both do guided imagery and meditation and relaxation, and they have like hundreds of videos, and it's a great way to just kind of slow down and unwind and get your mind onto something different. I think so many of us can totally relate to not wanting to fall asleep because you just know you're like, okay, I'm either going to have night terrors all night long, or I'm just going to toss and turn, or I'm going to have really emotionally like vivid and intense dreams about them. And then, you wake up in the morning and then in many ways, it's just a terrible start to your day. So I get it. I totally get that if that's something that you're struggling with. But like I said, there's lots of videos out there on YouTube. So maybe start there and then let me know kind of what you're looking for, and I can see if I can put something together. New Chris is saying, no, rent a small caravan and do a podcast. That would be fun too. Bonnie says, or you could bring the kids with you guys in the RV. Oh my gosh. That would be a lot. That would be a lot of people in an RV. Maybe her husband could get an RV and we could caravan. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Karen says this is her first time watching live. Welcome. Pink Pixie says, yes. Does anybody have any chronic nightmares that seem real? I think that's very, very common. They do tend to kind of fade in time. And when I say time, that amount of time varies from person to person. For me, what I experienced the first, I would say like at least 3 to 6 months were the worst. And the first few months were absolutely awful. I mean, I would wake myself up either screaming or crying. It was just awful. And I was exhausted, and they weren't even like bad dreams. They were just really emotionally intense. And that was just the worst. I'd never had dreams like that before that were so emotionally just powerful. I mean, there was a lot of like sadness and just, I don't know, heartache, I guess would be the theme, or anger, just intense amounts of anger in those kinds of dreams in the early days of all of this. Okay, let me scroll down. And it's your brain working through everything that's happened is what it is. And it's trying to kind of make sense of all of it and trying to just process a really intense situation, that you went through. That's way outside the realm of normal. And that's a big part of the reason why we tend to have these kind of reoccurring nightmares or night terrors, and they can be so vivid and so on. If they're really bad and they keep continuing, you can go talk to your doctor. There's a medicine that's been shown to be effective for people that struggle with nightmares from PTSD, and it's called prazosin, or depending on where you live in the country, sometimes people call it prazosin. But that's a medication that's that helps people with nightmares. So that might be something worth, if they're really bad and it's been going on for a while, to make a phone call to like your doctor or your nurse practitioner or whoever and talk to them about it and see if that's an option. Yeah, Alcuda Babe says, yeah, sadness and heartache was in the early days for me in my dreams too. It was very emotional. Camilla says, speaking of nightmares, I had a vivid nightmare. I was in school with one of my friends walking down the hall, and a killer whale busts through the floor. and I couldn't get by. Any idea on what that means? That is so interesting. Dreams are such a funny thing, aren't they? Uh, and I think they mean different things to different people. I don't know. For me, the best way for me to understand my dreams isn't so much the topic of my dream, because it's always random stuff like that, right? Like robots came out of the sky, and then or some like I could fly, or I could jump over houses, or just strange stuff, killer whales popping through floors. For me, it's never really been about the thing, like the symbols in the dream. It's been more about how I feel about the symbols in my dream. So if you were feeling fearful or overwhelmed or intimidated, or powerful, or kind of what was going on, and then maybe to kind of like drill down and explore those emotions. Like, is there something going on in your life that you're feeling, you know in with those kinds of emotions? So if you're feeling really overwhelmed by like a killer whale, or just caught off guard, depending on like what your reaction was to this killer whale showing up on land in the middle of a school, right? um Kind of what do you think that meant, and why do you think, like, why did your brain choose a killer whale? Why did your brain choose such a person from so long ago? And kind of exploring that. The cool thing, if you write down dreams with dream journals, is sometimes we can write down a dream and we might not know what it means for like a day or two, maybe even a week, maybe even more. But then we can come back around to it and we're like, oh wow, okay, yeah, that's what that meant. Dreams are funny. They really are kind of the doorway to our subconscious. Dispatch asks, I recently started seeing a therapist. How will I know they are helping me? Are there certain things they should or shouldn't be counseling me on? Well, every therapist is different. And so, it just depends. And so their approach is all going to be different. If there's if there's certain things that you want to work on, uh, normally, they'll kind of, well, I don't know. Every therapist I've had too has been so very different. If you're there for one specific thing, because everything's kind of tied together, you know what I mean? So like you might go in for one thing, but then you kind of find that you're off exploring something else, and maybe those things are related and maybe they're not. And it just kind of takes a while to just kind of explore. But I would ask your therapist. I think that's a really great question of, you know, um, how will I know if this is working, and what areas, what is your approach? How are you thinking that we're going to kind of move forward in all of this? And then I think also for you, kind of getting clarity of what are the things that you're wanting to work on, and how are you going to gauge the kind of forward momentum in some sort of area. I mean, for me with therapy, I guess my two main goals would have been, am I having any aha moments in here? And because sometimes, you know, it doesn't take, we don't need to have all the pieces figured out. Sometimes it's just maybe one aha moment that can just radically change the direction of our life. So for me, it would be, am I having any aha moments, or am I connecting any dots in here that I haven't otherwise? And what would I just lost my train of thought? Am I connecting any dots that I wouldn't have otherwise? Well, I can't remember the second thing I was going to say. Shoot, I hope that comes back to me. But I think, am I feel, depending on what you're going for, if you're going for kind of moving, like healing from trauma, that kind of stuff, are you feeling supported and validated? I think that's really, really huge. And that takes a while. It takes a while because we've all been through some really intense stuff that most people struggle with understanding or believing. And so, um, it can take a while to just kind of open up to another person and really feel like, okay, like they believe me, even though this sounds completely outrageous. And you can always set the pace too. So if you're in therapy and they're kind of, things start getting uncomfortable, you can always say like, okay, you know what, I'm not comfortable talking about that. So just because they might want to take the conversation in a certain direction doesn't mean that you have to follow. So that's something to consider too, especially if it's really upsetting you or if it's really creeping you out. Especially if it's creeping you out. If it's creeping you out, I would say get a different therapist. But if it's sometimes progress and connecting the dots, it can be painful and it can be upsetting. It's a fine line to walk, and I don't know if an outside person, they kind of, we know where our lines are with things, and so it's really hard for anybody else to kind of navigate that. And so sometimes they might bring up some stuff that might like, or they might challenge us, or kind of reflect back to us what we're saying or what we're thinking, and that can be really upsetting. And sometimes being challenged and having things reflected back can provide insight, but sometimes they can really shut a person down and make a person feel very re-victimized. So it's just it's a hard line to walk, you know? And sometimes it does take a few going through a few therapists to really find a good fit. Okay. Let's see here. Somebody made a comment that looked interesting. Soccer mom responded to it. Hold on, let me see if I can find the original comment. Something. Oh, here we go. Okay. Saul says, "Hey Dana, I'm back to dating. I'm trying to set boundaries and listen to my gut instincts, and it feels like it contradicts with my belief of not wanting to judge people and not wanting to have prejudices." Okay, this is a really valid point and something I think a lot of people, myself included, have struggled with. So let's clear that up right now. There is a difference between being, I think, judgmental and being discerning. And it's very important that you are discerning about what you want in your life, especially as far as other people are concerned. So, judging, the way that I view it is judging is saying you're bad, you're good. It's more critical. Discerning, while it might include judging, it might say, you know what, that's bad. That's a problem. I don't want that in my life. Being discerning is kind of a step up from that, in the sense of a person doesn't even need to be bad or good in order for us to not want them in our life. Like, we might just not click with them. We might not have enough in common. They might just not be for us. And so it's important that we are discerning and that we do know ourselves well enough. And it can take a little practice because it can feel mean. Like, well, I need the feeling of, oh, I need to give everybody multiple chances. I somehow owe it to them. Can't judge a book by its cover, kind of thing. And that's really problematic thinking, because if you're getting a bad vibe from somebody, you don't owe anybody anything, especially a total stranger. And um, if you're getting a bad vibe from somebody and you're going on a date with them or what have you, it's there, we have to kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that ties in perfectly too with setting boundaries, because setting boundaries when we're not used to doing it on a regular basis, it feels really uncomfortable. And it takes practice kind of managing, not only like learning to say no, but it takes practice learning how to manage that discomfort and doing what we know we need to do regardless of feeling that discomfort. So I'm a big fan when dating people, because I don't like, when I was dating, um, I would feel I would feel bad a lot about things. And so, with online dating, oh, there were so many things I did wrong. I would that's a whole nother book I could write, things to not do. But I would spend a lot of time talking or texting with the person on the phone before I met them, which creates this false sense of closeness with the person. And if you meet in person and they're not your type, like if they're really weird, or what's worse is if they're super nice, but there's just not that connection. And then it's really uncomfortable because you're like, oh my God, I feel like I've led this person on. I don't want to hurt their feelings. I feel like such a jerk. We had this great chemistry over the phone, but in person, we don't at all. And then it's real easy to kind of continue dating, going on multiple dates with somebody, and there's just no chemistry there. Or um, allowing for like your first date to be a long one, like dinner and maybe a movie, especially if the other person's paying. And then it's kind of this sense of obligation of, oh my gosh, I owe this person a kiss, or I owe this person to see them again. We've spent so much time together, and then things can just get weird because you've spent so much time with the person kind of right away. And within the first, 5-10 minutes, if there's any chemistry. So that can be awkward. So I think the big lessons I learned from that is don't spend a lot of time up front talking and texting a person. Like if you're talking about online dating stuff, you see their profile, you like, okay, we've got enough to kind of click with. If there is enough to click with, right? Then message back and forth a few times. I would say talk on the phone once, not more than 15-20 minutes, just to make sure if there's like that connection over the phone, and that you don't get a weird vibe over the phone. And then meet for coffee. Nothing extended, no dinner, no no movie, no like hours long thing. You guys each meet at like, don't have that person pick you up. Just meet at a coffee shop for 20 minutes, buy your own cup of coffee, get there a little bit early. That way there's no sense of obligation. There's no sense of like, oh, I feel like I owe this person my time because they bought me a cup of coffee. You're just totally casual. It's just a meeting. It's not even a date. Like they're just seeing if there's chemistry, because people they can put up old pictures of themselves. They can put up flattering pictures themselves. Uh, like I said, there could just not be chemistry in person. So doing all of that really cuts down on those feeling bad about being judgmental and setting boundaries and saying no and not wanting to see a person again, because neither one of you has a ton of stuff invested. And I look at it too as this is respect for them. So they may want to, it's not even about like you trying to, protect yourself from being hurt. It's also showing respect for the other person. They may be a really great person, but then it's not fair to them if you're like spending all of the, this all hours upon hours talking and texting, and then you meet, and then they're even though they're responsible for their emotions and their time and their energy and their emotions, it's just so much easier to just be like, hey, you know what? Like, let's just keep this light. Like, let's just meet and then go from there. So yeah. And postmodern is saying, yep, mine gave no indication he was married online. And when I asked him, he said no. I had no proof otherwise, so I believed him. Yeah, and that's very common. That's another thing, is don't try really hard to not develop any feelings for a person, especially before you meet them, because there are tons of married people online. They're bored or they're married and they're flirting or they're just looking for sex, and they can really come across as incredibly charming. They can say all the right things because they're emotional con artists. Like they're just trying to get you in bed, or they're looking to harm a person. I mean, there's just all kinds of crazies out there, and you just don't know. And they're not only online, right? Like these people exist in the real world too. So even if you meet a person at work, or it's a friend of a friend and you go on a date, I'm a big fan of just seriously keep things light, and then meet, and then still keep things light. And it makes things so much easier just to go slow like that. Deborah says, yeah, I used to do that, talking to people for hours before I met them. Yeah, I did too. It's so interesting how much online dating has changed, especially over, the past like 5 or 10 years. It used to be like, I had a friend who was really into online dating pretty much when it first came out. And she had met this amazing guy who lived across the country, and he was legit. He seemed to be everything that he'd said. They had this kind of long distance romance thing going for several years, and they would fly back and forth. And Anyways, so that ended up kind of fizzling out. And then she had a few other relationships between that. And then she got on online dating for like the first time in 10 years, 10, 15 years, and kept getting caught up with all of these scammers. And she would tell me about, oh, I met this guy, he's in the military, he's so awesome, but he's not here now, but he's gonna be back in a few weeks. And I'm like, girl, this guy is a scammer, and then sure enough, and then she'd get upset with me, and then sure enough, he'd start asking for money. And then the next guy was some, business guy who was also out of town. And she was getting her heart broken over and over and over again because she was allowing these guys, these scam artists, to set the pace. And those people, that's their playbook. Like, they will rope a person in and they will spend hours upon hours upon hours talking and texting with the person. And they've even upped their game where they start sending people small presents. Like the friend I was talking about, the scammer sent her a long stemmed red rose, and then he sent her a small box of chocolates. And when the gifts started happening, I was like, well, maybe he is legit, because I hadn't heard of scammers doing that until then. And then I realized, oh my God, that's totally like, he's trying to build credibility, right? Of being like, oh no, I'm so into you. A scammer wouldn't really send you. The scammer's not going to spend money on you, right? They're only going to ask for money. And no, like they've leveled up. Another scammer that thankfully she didn't lose any money to these people. Like, she was out, as soon as the topic of them asking for money came up, she was gone. But there was another guy who was telling her that he had an adult daughter who was at university in London, and that she was in town visiting. And he puts this woman on the phone who was pretending to be his adult daughter. And she's like, oh, I just want to find out who this woman is that's stolen my father's heart. And I just, you're all he talks about, and blah, blah, blah. So it's all of these different ways that they're adding credibility to their story. And so again, she got really hooked into this, thinking, well, why would he's got to be legit, or else he wouldn't put his daughter on the phone. Right. And of course, like, she's not his daughter. It's some sort of call center, and who knows where, that they run these kinds of scams. So you just don't know who people are. And even when you meet them in person, you don't even really know who they are. I mean, it takes months to even begin to know who a person is. So I'm a big fan of, if they have a screen name, Google their screen name, Google their real name. If they have pictures, if you find like a Facebook account, or if you're on whatever dating site, do an image search for their pictures, and you'll be surprised at the stuff that comes up. So, okay. Too Cute asks, hi, Dana. Question. Things are going good. Then why am I still struggling with depression? I can have a very good day, and then all of a sudden I have a bad evening. I'm very depressed. I'm exhausted dealing with this. Well, it's tough. I mean, these healing from this kind of stuff, it really can be an emotional roller coaster, and it can be shocking at how quickly we can go from being fine to like really not fine. So I would just encourage you to try to anticipate for those low moments and develop a plan of like, okay, what are you going to do? And then to be compassionate with yourself, and just realize, okay, this is just part of it. This is just part of it. You're going through a lot. Healing is not a straight line. It's a very messy, convoluted process. And sometimes we take 2 steps forward and then a step backward. And then sometimes 5 steps forward and sometimes 7 steps backwards. It is what it is. And so asking yourself, okay, what can I do to be extra compassionate with myself during this time? And maybe that means kind of clearing your schedule for the rest of the night. Or maybe that means going out with a friend, or taking a hot bath, or watching a good movie, or getting lost in a good book, or going to bed early, or whatever it might mean for you during this time, then do that. Because I will tell you, the one thing that I have learned through all of this is that guarantee you, you will never look back at this point on your life and think to yourself, boy, I really wish I would have worried about that more, you know? So knowing that you're never going to look back and think, boy, I really wish I would have stressed out about this whole situation more, or that I wish I would have worried about things more. You're going to look back on this time and be like, boy, I really wish I would have tripled up on my self care. I really wish that I just would have allowed myself just time and more self compassion. So I hope that that helps. Okay, let me scroll down here. So my computer is, I think, farther away than normal. I'm having a hard time reading the screen. Either that or I need glasses, one of the two. Too Cute says, but Dana, my problem is I get very hard on myself when I am having a depressing evening. I get mad at myself. I wasted my time. Like wasted your time in the relationship or wasted your time being depressed? All of our emotions, especially the uncomfortable ones, all have messages for us. And if we can kind of dig out the message, then the emotion is like a carrier pigeon for the message. And if we can take away the message, then the carrier pigeon has done its job and it tends to leave. So the challenging part with these types of healing from an abusive relationship of any kind is there's so many messages our inner self is trying to get through to us. And one of the, I think, primary messages is that it's that reminder of don't be around this person or anybody ever like this person again. And so we tend to feel depressed. We're like, man, I spent all this time with this person. I built this life with this person. It was all smoke and mirrors. And you can struggle with feeling just emotionally devastated by that. And it's understandable. It's a very valid feeling to have. But I think at the same time, that kind of goes back to that self-compassion piece of the puzzle of, you did the best that you could with the information that you had. And that's all any of us can do. And you're not alone in this. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of people that have been caught up with these kinds of people, but you can work towards rebuilding your life. You can rebuild your life and make it into something that was even better than before. And I've talked about this before, but this is kind of, I think maybe the silver lining in much of this is when your whole world is blown apart and you're surrounded by the rubble of your life, then you get to decide which pieces that you want to rebuild with. And the vast majority of people that haven't gone through something like this, even though that sounds really overwhelming and like, no, that's terrible, I don't want to do that. There's beauty in that, because then you're building up, you're being conscious about the life that you're building up. And then you start living a life of purpose on purpose. And people that have never had anything like this happen to them tend to never be put in a position where they have to actually rebuild their whole life, because, who wants to do that? Like, that's a really big task. It's a really big undertaking. But what happens is those people, I would say the vast majority of them, tend to live lives of kind of this quiet desperation. They're in jobs they don't like. They're with spouses they don't like. Things are chugging along because out of this sense of comfort, right? Like, this is what they know and this is what they're going to continue to do. I think the percentage of people out there that are truly living a great life, that they have like an authentic life that's truly them, is very small. I think it's a very small percentage of people. And frankly, even then, I think the people that are actually living an authentic life and a good life, I think probably a lot of them have been through tremendous amounts of trauma. It's really difficult to live an authentic life on point where you've examined every single piece that goes into your life and tossed out the pieces that you don't want any other way. So I would say work on your self-compassion. This is hard. This is a hard, truth to come to accept of what happened and what this means and all of it. Kuda Babe says, um, Corey Wayne says that you attach what you believe. Can you elaborate on that? Do you think this is the case? I think no one deserves to be dated by a narcissist. Attached, you mean attract? Like attract what you believe? Like law of attraction, is that what we're talking about? I think I think law of attraction is our point of attraction to other people is the relationship we have with ourselves. And because this tripped me up for a long time too. I was like, okay, well, if I dated a sociopath, does that mean that I'm a sociopath? Like if like attracts like, then what exactly does that mean? But here's the thing is we attract people at our point of our relationship with ourselves. And if our point of relationship is one that is because many of us tend to be, normal, decent, good, trusting people. But because of that, we also tend to be very naive. And it's not even our fault because the world is changing at such a radical pace. Like I was saying, my friend, her experience with online dating, radically different 15 years ago than it is today. It's just with the internet, with technology, scam artists are out there in full force, and normal, decent people we don't think like that. So it's really difficult for us. I mean, my God, I feel like I'm a pretty savvy person. I've been through a lot. I've helped other people. I've listened to other people that have gone through a lot. Like I'm not naive. And yet even still, like with running my Facebook group that's probably the best example, running my Facebook group, we continually have issues in there that blow our mind. Me and the other admins where we're like, we would have never thought of that. And sometimes you just need to go through something in order to understand it, which is a hard way to learn. So I guess the point being is if our relationship with ourself is one where, like the person was saying, Saul was saying before, where we don't want to judge, where we give people second and 22nd chances, where we gloss over our intuition because we feel mean or judgmental, or we doubt ourselves too much. If we're not rock solid, and that's not even saying that couldn't prevent ever getting tangled up with a narcissist or a sociopath. Like these people are good, but it gives us a fighting chance is if you can get really grounded in yourself and in your intuition and in your emotions and understand that those all emotions have messages for you, especially those uncomfortable emotions. Listen to them. Don't argue them. Don't try to justify them. Just take a few steps back and listen to what they have to say. Like your gut instinct is very rarely wrong. So, but that's the thing. Like a person doesn't even need to be like a huge degree out of alignment in order to get tangled up with one of these people. I mean, they prey on kind, good people. And like I said, normal, decent, kind people tend to not see these other people coming. So we can only do what we can do. Janet says, I felt so ashamed because I kept hearing, you are so naive. Your narcissist has you around his finger. I felt dumb and useless. And it's so difficult because when we're emotionally invested in a situation, we want to give it our all. And most of us that have been tangled up in these situations, we have a high degree of like loyalty and commitment and a lot of really great positive traits, but that those traits are then exploited by people who are highly manipulative and they run with them. So it's, all you can do is all you can do at the time. And kind of once you know different, then you can start doing different. It took me years. I was actively searching, reading self help books, going to therapy, talking to other people, trying to figure out how to make my life work for decades. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't know if maybe I wasn't ready. I don't know why I didn't piece things together for me sooner. I don't know. And frankly, I'm probably still at the beginning stages of it all. But, um, you know, I don't, I guess I look back on my own life and I think I couldn't wrap my mind around, I think had that mindset of everybody is a beautiful, wonderful person deep down inside. And that if I could just get through to them, or that my love could somehow fix them, or if I could just communicate more effectively, then they would change. And so it was this kind of perpetual need of trying, trying to kind of just get through to them, you know? Or I don't know, there was a mix that was, and I'm saying it out loud and I'm thinking of other things. I mean, that was part of it, but then I think there was a part of it too, where it didn't ever dawn on me that I should walk away. I mean, I had that limiting belief of commitment's forever and friendship is forever. And so I would hang on in situations well past the time that it was to let go, because to me, like letting go meant failure, and it meant that I wasn't trying hard enough. So I had a lot of really kind of, twisted beliefs about love and commitment and friendship and all kinds of things, you know. And that's the thing, is any one of those beliefs, if a person has them, that can drag you off into the bushes. Like, it doesn't take a whole lot to really derail a person. It just one kind of faulty thinking taken to an extreme, because in health, in a normal or healthy relationship, those kinds of sayings or beliefs are good. Commitment is forever. That's fantastic if you've got a partner, if you have a true partner in a relationship who's got that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. There is that sense of mutuality, that you can build a team, that you can get through life together. That's a totally different story. You get manipulation in the mix and it just changes everything, and then those concepts can be twisted and really used against a person. And then we feel bad. And, it's just, manipulation is awful that way. Maria is talking about the book Necessary Endings. She says, that is why I love Necessary Endings. I look at endings more positively, the magic of new beginnings. I agree. I loved that book so much. So much. And I think that's been the only book that I have ever read where he just really lays it out. He's like, you know what? Life is about letting go. Life is about endings. And I think there is so much wisdom in that book. I feel like I need to go back and read it a few more times, because I think there is so much wisdom in that. And I think a big part of healing from anything is, developing that level of resilience. Like I think our mental health in general is largely dependent upon how resilient we are. And I think, unfortunately, that whole kind of trait of resiliency is something that's just been it's something that's really not discussed until a person's been traumatized, right? And then it's sort of like, okay, well, now we're behind the ball and we're trying to teach people how to be resilient. So now we're going to talk about coping mechanisms after a person finally, because most people, Maria, like, they get into therapy when they can't handle things anymore. Like, they're already at the end of the rope. And now they put all this pressure on a therapist of like, okay, I need you to fix me in 3 sessions, right? Or my insurance only covers 8 sessions and I need this to work. And it's like, oh my goodness, okay, well, this is going to take a little bit. Like we're turning around a steamship here, and there's a lot of things for a person to learn as far as like coping mechanisms and coping methods and um, uh, learning to be more resilient, which I think is totally something that can be taught. And with that is the whole thing with like learning to let go of things are going to end in our life. And instead of if we can embrace I think if we can embrace that and realize, like Maria was saying, it's an ending, but it's also an exciting and empowering new beginning, you know? And to kind of lean into, well, what is it? What does this mean? What does this mean? And to develop a compelling vision for the next chapter of your life is there's so much power. It's endings can be so tragic, but they can be so powerful. And it's just such almost like a magical time in a person's life of it's that spark of creation of like, well, what's next? You know? So yes, great, great book. Uh And that's a good way to say it. JJ says, law of attraction is often misinterpreted. It's not like attracts like, it's more that manipulators are attracted to the manipulatable. Yeah. Yeah. It's a little confusing when you think about how law of attraction works. So let's take, for example, kind of something a little different here, but like with people with alcoholics. Okay. So it's not, let me see, let me draw this. I'll kind of explain it. Find some scrap paper around here somewhere. So if you think of, Ross Rosenberg talks about this in his book, like the human magnet syndrome, where you have a magnet. So it's kind of U-shaped, right? And that you've got a person on either side of the magnet that they're going to be attracted to each other. And kind of his whole theory is, opposites attract. That's why. So you've got kind of the empath and the narcissist. But I think that's one part of it, and that's a very valid part of it. So like you're saying, the manipulated and the manipulators tend to attract, but I think it looks more like a W and not a U. So take, for example, so with narcissists, right? So you're either going to have narcissists that are attracted to empaths, or you're going to have narcissists that are going to be attracted to other narcissists. Sort of like, criminals hang out with other criminals, or they hang out with people that they can take advantage of. Like, and not to knock on alcoholics, but it tends to kind of work the same. It's the same with anybody, right? If you're struggling, if you're a recovering alcoholic or you're struggling with it, I'm not picking on you. But like if a person's an alcoholic, odds are they're going to be attracted to people that either enable that, or they're going to be attracted to people that tend to drink about the same level that they do. We all do stuff like this. Okay. So if a person has a drinking problem, it's going to be very uncomfortable for them to be around somebody who who drinks less than they do. So if they're drinking 10 drinks a night and you're only drinking 2, odds are they're going to try to push you into drinking more because if they're drinking and you're not, then it's going to make them feel more aware of how much they're drinking. So it's the same thing with people that struggle with any type of addiction, shopping, food, drugs, you name it. They're either going to hang out with enablers, or they're going to hang out with people that have about the same level of addiction that they do. Anything kind of in between that is going to make them feel really uncomfortable. Okay, Bonnie says, how about waking up to a nightmare of 30 years being married to a narcissist and a dead marriage, having to completely rebuild your life from square one? Yes. Well, I would say that there's a lot of people out there in the community that are going through exactly that, and it is. That's a lot. I can't imagine. And I would reach out to people that are going, I think it's important for you just to realize that you're not alone and that there's lots of other people out there in my community, this community, and in other communities online that are going through the exact same thing, that have been married 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and that are at that point where they're like, oh my God, I just fully understand now that this person's never going to change. I didn't realize that these people they existed. I didn't realize that I was being manipulated for all these years, and I'm awake to it now. And oh my God, it's overwhelming, but you can rebuild. You can get peace in your life, you know. Okay, let me scroll up here. That is so true. Kana says, the loneliness can be so intense sometimes, but I do find it slowly forces me to learn and accept so much about the world and myself, and it leads to a better path. Yes, absolutely. I agree completely. Because there's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. And feeling lonely, I think if we can become, and this is going to sound really cliche, but if you can become your own best friend where you enjoy being around yourself, then you're not really bored. Then you're not really lonely. And you're able to go out and do stuff. And I know for some people this is a lot easier than others. Um, but once you learn to really get comfortable with your own company, and then there's sites too for those that really do want to be around other people and they don't know where to begin. You've heard me talk about it before. I'm a big fan of meetup.com. I think it's fantastic. It's a great way to get out there. It's not a dating site, to get out there, to meet new people, um, to do new fun things. I encourage you, if you've got meetup groups in your area, to sign up for, like, I know this sounds like a lot, but sign up for like 20. You don't have to do everything that they do, but at least if you are feeling lonely, you can hop online and see, hey, is anybody doing anything tonight? Is anybody having a game night, or is anybody going for, a midnight kayak thing, which is a big thing around here? Or is anybody going on a hike after work, and just seeing what people are doing online? It can be a really great way to start getting back into life. Oh, I love that. Kendra says, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to work on a vision board. I am going to love myself so hard that will make me into who I was meant to be. I love that. Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's so interesting too. If there's so much that I think a person can learn about themselves from just going through the process of putting together a vision board. I remember back when I first heard of the concept, which was years ago. It's probably at least a solid 10, maybe even 15 years ago. And my very first vision board, I wish I would have kept them or kept pictures of them. I went through magazines and I cut out a bunch of pictures of things that I thought I should want. And what's so weird is I didn't even realize that it's not even what I wanted. Like, that's how out of tune I was with myself. I was cutting out pictures of, like, okay, well, this is what success looks like, right? Or like this this is what like, how, I don't know, healthy relationships look like, or what friendships look like, or what, I was so off in the bushes. Like, it was ridiculous. I'd look at it back and now, and I just think that, wow, what was I even thinking? But anyways, I'm glad I went through that process, because it helped me to get clearer with my thinking of, is that really, like, do I really care about a fancy car or certain type of clothes? No, like, I totally don't. And I don't. And really exotic vacations, I've traveled to quite a few places, and traveling is cool, but I don't know. Like, I live in Michigan. I love Michigan. To me, a really solid vacation is going up north. So Like I'm a pretty simple person. Camping, campfires, cold beer. Like I just not very complicated. Some good friends. And that's it. That's a good Friday night for me. So um just kind of knowing yourself and like what do these different things look like, and then getting clear. So then as you're finding, and maybe for you it's not pictures, maybe it's finding certain words, or here's something else that I noticed that was, I thought, very interesting, is it's not even about the stuff. So if you're finding yourself really gravitating towards and there's no judgment, like if you're really like, I really want a Lamborghini, or I really want to vacation in Paris or whatever, like that's you, like that's good that you know that about yourself. um but what I have found, that it's rarely about, we rarely want the thing. It's rarely like the car or the clothes or the trips or whatever. It's more about what the emotion that we think those things will bring us. So maybe having $1 million, it's that sense of financial freedom, or it's that sense of relief of, okay, I can pay my bills and I can just breathe. Or maybe the car, having a really high end car, it's that sense of, maybe it's that feeling of like security, or maybe it's that feeling of importance, like, hey, people would look at me, or maybe they would respect me if I had this certain type of car. Do you see what I'm saying? Or if it's a vacation, then depending on like where it's at, maybe you're wanting, if you're going with other people, maybe it's that sense of connection or the sense of community, or kind of the place that you want to travel to, like what that means to you. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just very interesting when you start kind of thinking about, why am I picking out these images? And is this what I really want? Is this what I really, really want in my life? Oh, that was a good comment and I just lost it. Shoot. Who said that? Was it Jay? Somebody said something about, yes, with the kind of the like attracts like. I said, if you're walking around I cannot find that comment again. If you're walking around feeling unimportant, you're basically going to accept a person who treats you like you're unimportant. That's it. That's so true. That goes back to having that relationship with ourselves. So if we think that we don't matter, then we're not going to start filtering out people that treat us any different. That's why it's so important for us to really kind of raise our standards, and to get clear on like where our deal breakers are, and like what's workable and what's a deal breaker. And that you matter, oh boy, that you matter, and your hopes and your dreams and your wants and your needs and your thoughts and your feelings, all of that stuff matters, you know? And to find a person that has that team mentality, because life with a partner, it's like running a 3-legged race. You want a good partner when you're running a 3-legged race. Kana says, I just dumped my last friend. I have 0 friends right now, and I am so proud. I feel stronger and destined for success and way more focused on goals. Well, and sometimes that's a part of it, right? It's sort of like, you start looking around, you're like, man, I came here, I found my way onto this YouTube channel or into all of this information because of this one relationship with like my mother or with my husband or girlfriend or whoever it was. And then you start, after a little bit of time and some introspection, you're like, well, you know what? Actually, I've had quite a few of these people in my life. And you start kind of looking around and you're like, man, you know what? I have a lot of really crappy people in my life. I think I just kind of need to kind of clean out the fridge, so to speak, and then just start fresh. And sometimes that's a very real part of it, especially if we haven't felt worthy of having boundaries and standards. And we just have been very overly tolerant of however people treat us. We just have learned to somehow be okay with that. We've gotten so good at twisting ourselves into an emotional pretzel and hanging on until we can't hang on anymore, that odds are we have a lot of really unhealthy relationships in our life. And that is a big aha moment. And it can be really freeing to just be like, man, you know what? Like, I'm done with all of this. So good for you. That's a very powerful new place that you're in. Too Cute says, "Oh, what my life would be like without depression. I can't imagine." Well, Too Cute too is, if this is something that's been ongoing, I would encourage you. I would encourage you to make a phone call to your doctor. You know, and I say this. I am not a fan of medication, but I'm saying this as a person who was a former psychiatric nurse and a person who has struggled with depression pretty much their whole life. There's no shame in getting on medication. Sometimes you need to get on medication, and it does make an ocean of difference. I personally, I will go in waves. I'll be fine for like long stretches of time, and then I'll start like kind of feeling like how you feel, where start having these bad days where I just fall into a funk, and I have a hard time getting out of bed. I stop doing well. And then when those days become more and more frequent, I think, oh, I can handle it. I can handle it. I just need to kind of change my thoughts, and I need to get some more exercise or whatever. And then it takes more and more energy to get through the day. And that tends to be kind of a way for me to realize, okay, I think it's time for me to go talk to somebody and see about getting back on something. The hard part, I think, especially with depression, is it can come on, it can so quickly become our new normal. And because it's so hard for us, I think for any of us to kind of have that clarity of like we don't have that emotional distance, like we are in our body. And so we're close. We're close to ourselves. We're close to how we feel. And when that becomes a new normal, it can take a while for us to realize, hey, this is actually a problem. So I would encourage you to write down, like, what are your signs of depression? Because not everybody experiences it the same way. And then maybe it is time to make a phone call and see about doing something different. Because if what you're doing has continued for a while and it's not working for you, then it sounds like it's time to do something different. And I will say too, a lot of my friends and I were just talking about that earlier today, about seasonal depression versus like depression. And even just the difference of taking vitamin D every day, what a difference that can make in a person's mood. So, wintertime seasonal depression is a very real thing. So just some things to consider. Diane says, I'm learning about the cracks in my boundaries. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, the cool thing with that is life is continually giving you feedback. So every situation, every interaction that you have with another person, whether it's online or whether that's in person, is giving you feedback. And part of that feedback is kind of where your boundaries are. And it does take a lot of practice. I think it's kind of this ongoing, it gets easier over time, but it's also an ongoing thing over time, And if you're tuned into how you feel, if you leave a certain conversation feeling, anxious, irritated, resentful, upset, frustrated, kind of these emotions that we consider to be unpleasant. If you're experiencing these unpleasant emotions, it generally means that some sort of corrective action needs to be taken. And that can be a really great way to tell if your boundaries are violated. Because I think, like I said, so many of us before, we were very out of tune with those early warning signs that our boundaries are being violated. And we would gloss over them. We'd give people the benefit of the doubt. We would take blame when it wasn't ours to take. We felt guilty for saying no. We were people pleasing and walking on eggshells until things got so severe that we had to just jump ship because we couldn't handle it anymore. But if you can get in tune with stuff that's, when things are slightly askew, it's a lot easier to get things back on track and take whatever corrective action you need to take, whatever that might be. Kiara says, Dana, what advice do you have for people who fear seeing a therapist? Well, I guess I would ask you what the fear is. And there are, it's like finding any other professional out there, whether it's, a barber or a landscaper or an attorney or a good realtor. I mean, any other person out there. Sometimes you need to go through a few of them to find somebody that you really click with. I mean, a good therapist is worth their weight in gold, but it's difficult. That's the challenge too, is it's difficult to tell. I mean, with a barber, you can tell, hey, this is a bad haircut, or same with the landscaper, like, what have you done to my yard? It can be a lot trickier to tell when things are more muddled. And that's kind of the challenge with therapy, is if you're alone with this person and there is kind of like no witness to your experience, it can be really difficult to tell, like, is this working? Is it me? Is it them? Like, is it supposed to be like this, or what's going on? So that can be a little bit more challenging, but I would say initially up front with a therapist, having that rapport, especially if this is the first time you've ever gone to a therapist, I think that's really important, to have that rapport with them and to feel comfortable and to feel believed. That takes time. That, I would say, give that like probably a solid 2 or 3 sessions to start to kind of feel comfortable with them. And it's okay if you don't. I mean, sometimes, like I said, sometimes you got to go through a few to kind of find one that you click with. If you're into like life coaching, and I wish I would like to get together some sort of like referral network for therapists, because I wish I could recommend some that I know for certain are truly familiar with emotional abuse. And I don't know, maybe that's something that I'd like. I don't know. I don't know when or how I'm going to do that, but that's something that I would like to do. If you're looking for life coaches around this topic, I would say Angie Atkinson. I think she's a sweetheart and she knows her stuff. And I would also say Lisa Romano would be the two that, if I were looking for somebody now, that's who I would go to. There's also a ton of workbooks and books out there. There are YouTube videos, inner child kind of stuff, diving into it. And it depends on where a person is in their healing journey. So I really like Pia Melody. She's got a ton of videos on YouTube. They're all old, but she's got a lot of stuff. Somebody had recommended you can get a lot of her work at your library too. So you might want to ask your local library if they have any books of hers or CDs or videos, that kind of stuff. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Scrolling. People are talking about cashews. Okay. I was like, what is going on in the chat? People are talking about just kind of eating clean. That really is a big part of it. When I was a psych nurse and we used to have patients come in, and of course they'd call the nurse line and they're like, my medication is not working. I haven't slept. I'm exhausted. And, I feel terrible. And I would have them come in. I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? If we need to get you to see the doctor right away, or what's going on. And then you find out, oh, well, okay, you're drinking a pot of coffee in the morning and then like 2 liters of Mountain Dew in the afternoon, and you're eating, nothing but McDonald's. It's like, well, yeah, I would expect how you would feel terrible. Like, that's a normal response to, it's like putting pancake syrup in a car and expecting it to run okay. It's not. And people will fight you. And I would have been that person too 15 years ago. How do you, if somebody would have questioned my diet, I would have been like, no, this is what I normally do. Like, I drink a ton. I used to drink Diet Coke like you wouldn't believe back in the day. and smoke. I used to smoke. Oh, and then it was like, if people critiqued my lifestyle, it was like, no, 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 that I'm normally like that. But in addition to that, now I'm not sleeping and now I feel terrible. And didn't understand, like, your body can totally react differently to stuff. So it's weird because even though, let's say a person normally drinks a pot of coffee a day, but now they're having anxiety attacks or panic attacks. And they're like, well, it's not the coffee because I normally drink a pot of coffee a day. Well, your body chemistry is always changing. And it's amazing how, if you're under a tremendous amount of stress, all of a sudden you can become hypersensitive to caffeine, and you can drink a cup of coffee and it can keep you up all night. Or you can drink a cup of coffee and then later on start having panic attacks. And that's the weird thing about anxiety, especially panic attacks, is sometimes it's not so directly related. It's not like you drink a cup of coffee and then 20 minutes later you have a panic attack. It could be you're taking a stimulant like coffee, caffeine, and then 12 hours later or 6 hours later, you start feeling really jittery and having panic attacks, and you're not doing well, and then you're not sleeping. So I think there is a lot of solid, good advice to being as nourishing as you possibly can to your system right now. If you are feeling really stressed out, if you're having nightmares, if you're having anxiety, having a hard time sleeping, switch to decaf. Switch to decaf right now and see. You'll know in like a few days if there's a difference. So subtle changes like that can really have a huge impact. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Kiara says, I've experienced a lot of gaslighting and I'm paranoid to get help. Also, the last person I tried to reach out to essentially made me their therapist. Okay. Yeah. And I get, it's difficult. It can be difficult to find a good therapist. And unfortunately, it's like I said, any profession, 10% are wonderful, 10% are awful, 80% are somewhere in the middle. Have you joined any support groups? Because sometimes that can be fantastic. If you're willing to pay for life coaching kind of stuff out of pocket, like I said, I'd recommend Angie or Lisa Romano. Those are the two people that I feel really understand all of this, and that are compassionate and really I feel comfortable referring them, being like, you're in good hands. I feel like they really know their stuff, and you know, they've been doing this for a while. Okay, Lisa Romano, her focus, at least it was, I think it still is, but she was very big on like inner child kind of stuff, which I am too. I think that's a really big, important part of the puzzle. So, you can, it's like with any therapist or with any life coach, I would imagine that you could see, if there's a way that you could do some sort of, I don't know, brief, 10-minute or some sort of like intro session where you can just see if there's rapport there, if that you guys click, if you can kind of understand how they approach things. So therapists and life coaches are different. Life coaches tend to have the view of looking forward, taking the pieces of your past and then building on strengths and being like, okay, what are we doing now looking forward? Therapy by and large tends to be a lot of looking at the same pieces, but then kind of looking backwards and then, figuring out different connections. I think there's benefits to both. And it just, like I said, it just depends on who the therapist is, and it depends on who the life coach is. I would go with Lisa Romano or Angie, Tony Robbins, those kinds of people any day of the week over a lot of like the vast majority of therapists. But that's not to say, if I had, trying to think of, well, there's been a few therapists in our support group and in the chat who I think I would love to work with. I think that would, I, so I don't know. It just depends. It depends on their experience and how well they understand this topic. Yes, thank you. I can't believe I forgot that. Postmodern says, I recommend Melanie Tanya Evans. She's great too. Yes. And there's tons of, yes, Kiara says, I love Lisa. She's amazing. And right now I'm in college. I have a lot of debt. I can't afford to do Lisa's awesome program. Money has been tough, but they do have a lot of free stuff. Yes. Yes. And Rebecca says, I've seen quite a few therapists. Took me a while to find the one I have now. She makes me believe I'm not crazy, and I really appreciate that. Yes. Another type of therapy that you might find some value in that tends to, I think, rely less on a rapport with the therapist, and they don't really need to be super familiar with emotional abuse, is EFT and EMDR. Those two types of therapy. It's more guiding you through that, and then possibly even discussing the different emotions that surface. But actually, even still, like there's videos on YouTube for EMDR and EFT that you can do yourself on yourself if you're interested. But that's something to think about. Bonnie asks, Dana, why is inner child work an important part of the puzzle of narcissistic abuse? Because I think for a lot of us, we tend, like I was mentioning before, there tends to be Lisa, God, this desk is going to break. Lisa Romano, I think, sums it up perfectly. And she talks about it's not, I think one of her sayings is, it's not you, it's your programming. Meaning a lot of where we find ourselves in life tends to come from our programming, basically our early childhood programming. So, and that programming really, it tends to happen from our parents, from society, from religion, from friends, from the ages of like birth to the age of 7 is where a lot of our main programs come from. How we interact with the world, how we view ourselves, the way that we're able to attach or detach from others, our levels of self-esteem, self-worth, just so much happens in like those early years. And so it's always kind of worth going back and kind of examining these parts of our inner child that might be damaged, that might need some work. I think a lot of us, even if you had a really fantastic childhood, a person can still have a lot of really faulty programming and not realize it. Or that faulty programming, like I was saying earlier, if a person has the thought of like commitments forever, if you grew up in a really healthy family, then that might not have been a problem. But you get tangled up with a manipulator, then all of a sudden that same belief system is a huge problem. So it can be going back and examining a lot of this programming and then just kind of seeing, does this still fit, or do I need to kind of have some caveats to these belief systems so that my life can start working for me? So once we can really heal, kind of repair kind of update the programming, I guess, and then see if there's if we're kind of acting out patterns, maybe from some sort of damage or trauma from our childhood, then we can start healing ourselves moving forward. So here's an example of that. I mention this example all the time because I think a lot of other people can relate to it. I had been going through my life for a very long time, feeling very unloved and unimportant for a wide variety of reasons. I didn't realize that I was feeling this way because I'd been feeling that way for so long. And of course, even then, when it's all you've ever really known, you don't really know how to feel any other way. So I'd been going through life feeling that way, and I kept getting tangled up with emotional manipulators, as with friends, with people, coworkers, with men, not all of the time, but a lot of the significant relationships in my life were with really problematic people. And when I made the connection that where I kept going wrong was I was misreading their level of intensity and that love bombing. I was misreading that as sincerity. And it's not. Like, intensity is not the same thing as sincerity, and love bombing is not the same thing as love. And so then realizing that, and realizing I kept falling for it because I had been so starved out for so long. And so when somebody was really quick to create this whirlwind and then just, pour on all of this attention and affection, I was drinking it up, not realizing that this was problematic and that they weren't sincere. And so once I realized that's why I keep getting caught up with these same kinds of people, I didn't even really need to do a whole lot of work underneath that. It was just that realization. It was just that aha moment of like, boom, that set my life on a very different very positive, different trajectory where I quit getting caught up in that stuff. Whereas before, I didn't see that there was really a pattern of that happening. It would periodically happen, but it would come in different ways, right? So like these people were coming in different forms in my life. One time it might be a coworker who's older. The next time it might be a boyfriend. The next time it might be a female friend. So my brain wasn't linking up that this was the same situation that was repeating. It took me a long time to make that connection, that these were the repeating elements. And all of these situations started off the exact same way. It was that level of intensity. It was even with friendship, like that love bombing with a friendship, like very quick to want to make me their new best friend. And things would become this huge whirlwind, and I would get sucked up in it. And I wanted it to get sucked up in it because I thought, this is so awesome. I've met this amazing person. And then things would either come crashing down, or they would slowly start to turn really problematic. And I had a very hard time ending friendships because I didn't believe in ending friendships or relationships. So I would hold on until I couldn't hold on anymore. And then I had a lot of mixed emotions about that. So sometimes just getting pieces of that puzzle of figuring out, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? Where along the line did I pick up the message that it was somehow okay for me to be treated like this? Where did that come from? And sometimes it might not have come from anywhere. We might have just been incredibly lonely, and that's why we continue to settle for crumbs. But sometimes you're like, you know what? I was that emotional, the term like emotional, but my empty buckets, right? So we all have these different buckets that we go through life. We have physical needs, and we have emotional needs, and then we kind of have this need for stability in our life. So here's another example. There was a guy that I met a few years ago on here, and they moved around a lot when he was a child. His home life was incredibly unstable, and it caused him a lot of anxiety, a lot of embarrassment, and he just really wanted, on a subconscious level, he wanted a stable life. And so when he got older, he got involved with this woman, and he stayed with her, and she was incredibly awful to him. And he realized, he's like, oh my God, that's exactly why. He's like, I was craving stability. And even though this relationship was incredibly toxic, it was still stable. And I didn't want to lose that stability. And so once he was able to tie those two things together, it kind of set him free. Because he was just like, okay, yeah, I crave stability. I need to go find stability in my own life in healthier ways. But that was the piece that was keeping him stuck in that relationship. So it's interesting when we can start kind of making those connections. And that's okay. Postmodern, that's fair. I should have elaborated on that. She says, well, my therapist is very forward looking, and a lot are. If you've got a therapist that's really into cognitive behavioral therapy, they're going to be very strengths based. They're going to be very big on like reframing, and let's take kind of what happened and make this work for you. in moving forward. But it just depends on the type of therapy that they do. It depends on them, right? Like their own mindset and their own approaches with things. But yeah, so not to say that therapists are always digging up stuff from the past, but I think, I guess in a very simplistic view, that kind of tends to be the difference. Life coaches tend to only focus on like moving forward, versus therapy tends to focus, I guess it can focus on both. I don't know, different. Life coaching obviously is more of a peer-to-peer kind of relationship. They're a coach. It's not a therapist client type dynamic. They're kind of walking alongside you. So there's differences. Daniel is talking about antisocial. He says, people think that I'm antisocial, but I'm just hiding from people with antisocial personalities. I had a friend the other day, we were talking about this and the term antisocial. And she said, yeah, isn't it so weird how they're antisocial, but they're so outgoing? And I said, well, that term antisocial, I think it confuses a lot of people, but there's a difference between being asocial and antisocial. So if a person's asocial, it means that they don't want to be around other people, kind of anti people, like they want to be away from people. Anti-social is more of, they are anti-society. So they're not a big fan of like rules and laws. And I would say more so the focus on like social contracts, because there's a lot of people out there, like I'm not a big fan of rules and laws either, but that doesn't make me a sociopath. And, I think that makes me more of a libertarian. But the difference being, I would view it in more terms of like social contracts. If your word, if you agree to do certain things, the lying, the stealing, the cheating, the manipulating, the inability to form effective, constructive relationships with other people is problem with antisocial personalities. They're very manipulative and exploitative, and it's all about them, and they don't form sincere bonds with other people. It's all about using, abusing, exploiting other people. So it's a confusing term, but there's very, very big difference between being asocial and being antisocial. Okay. Let's see. Let's see here. Scrolling down. Shastina asks, what is the difference between cognitive behavioral therapy and CBT and DBT? DBT stands for dialectical behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy has to do with kind of changing your thoughts. It's cognitive, so having to do with your thoughts, and then behavioral, having to do with your actions. So it's really focusing on the impact of like your thoughts, how they impact your actions, and how your actions impact your thinking. So it's just kind of this feedback loop. So it's like your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, and how they're all related. It tends to be very strength based and very, like I said, reframing, changing your thoughts. If you change your thoughts, then you change your feelings. If you change your feelings, you tend to change your actions. And the cool thing about that whole process is you can start anywhere. So even changing an action, there is no such thing as small change. It all has this ripple effect. So if you change a thought, you're going to change how you feel. So for example, changing the thought of, well, I think the realization of this person's manipulative, or this is hoovering. That's probably a good example. They come back into your life. Instead of thinking, oh, I wonder if this time they're going to change. I wonder if this is going to be different. I wonder if they're sorry. I wonder, blah, blah, blah. And to see it for what it is and be like, this is just another level of the game. This is hoovering. So you change the thought, well, you change the feeling. And either now, if you see it as hoovering, it's going to either be a lot easier to detach, or you're going to get upset, but you're probably not going to fall back into it, at least not as easily as before, because you're not caught up in all of that thinking of, oh, but they said they're sorry. Now they said that they want to go to therapy, and they said they're going to kill themselves if I don't contact them. And they said this and they said that. And, they sent roses and blah, blah, blah. Like you see it for what it is. You're like, it's another level of the game. So your thinking about it has changed. Therefore, your emotions about it have now changed. And then when your emotions change about something, then your actions change. So if you see it as hoovering, you detach from it and you're like, this is so pathetic. This is another layer of their game. I'm done. Then your actions are going to change, which means you're breaking the cycle and you're breaking free. So that, I guess, would be kind of an example of cognitive behavioral therapy. Dialectical behavioral therapy really has its roots, I would say, in Buddhism. It's very mindfulness based. It's fantastic. I think it should be taught in every single grade school in as early as possible. It's something that we could all benefit from at any age. You can get workbooks on both of these things on Amazon if you're curious about it, or I'm sure you could watch videos on YouTube too. There's probably a lot of information out there. Dialectical behavioral therapy, so mindfulness and a big focus on kind of controlling your emotions and being in the moment, slowing things down, really kind of detaching, focusing on responding instead of reacting, I would say, is a big part of it. It's great. It's great. Like I said, I wish it was taught. Everybody could benefit from it. Okay, let's see here. Gigi says it's interesting that narcissistic personality disorder is in the DSM, but not narcissistic abuse. As far as I remember, no form of abuse is in the DSM. So narcissistic abuse is, was it Alice Miller? I don't think that's right. Who was it? I don't know. It might have been Alice Miller. Somebody, when they first began researching narcissism, realized that the abuse and neglect by a narcissistic parent, that type of abuse really stemmed from them needing to get their ego fed. But I would make the argument that I think all abuse is at the core narcissistic abuse, because it's all about power and control, and it's all about ego. It's all about, one person bullies another person, they're doing it to make themselves feel better, whether they realize it or not. So, but it's frustrating because a lot of the stuff isn't, even just the foundations of understanding abuse, that's a pretty big piece of the puzzle. And, that doesn't, as far as I remember, that's not in the, nothing even close to that's in the DSM. Okay, let's see here. Is it next week? Oh my gosh, Postmodern says is going to bed. She says, okay, good night, everyone. I'll see you next week. The book club is next week, I believe. Oh my gosh. And, oh no, my timer's right. Good. I thought I turned it off by accident. The book club is, you are correct, next Thursday. Thank you. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Book club on emotional blackmail is the book. And it'll be a good one to go through. Abuse Free says, "Hi Dana, how can you differentiate between healthy transparency versus a narcissist transparency? As one as once you mentioned they fake total transparency to gain trust." Okay, so I think if I understand your question correctly, you're asking basically the difference between sincere transparency and insincere transparency. If that's what you meant, then I would say time. It takes time. So and going so it's going slow. But if you've got a person in your life who has shown you that they have no moral compass, they're they're doing they're a very different person when you're not looking. If they're lying, they're cheating, they're manipulating, they're stealing, they're siphoning funds, they're up to all kinds of stuff. In my book, that's not workable, because who a person really is who they are when you're not looking. So if they're up to all kinds of shenanigans and like living a double life and like craziness, realize all you see is the tip of the iceberg, and their whole life is about insincere transparency. So you will never know whether or not they're telling the truth. And because you'll never know, for me, then that's not workable. Like a relationship requires trust, right? And so it's a mistake to it's appropriate to have trust issues with the person who has lying issues. And I think where we go wrong is we try to convince ourselves that we need to somehow work on repairing trust in a relationship with an untrustworthy person. And then we get upset with ourselves. We're like, what's so wrong with me? Why can't I trust them? Why can't I? It's like they're not emotionally safe. Like, of course you don't trust them. There'd be something wrong with you if you did trust them, because that's not a healthy response, you know? So then it comes to the point of, okay, where are your deal breakers? Because these people lie and manipulate every single day. I mean, multiple times throughout the day. And they do it for reasons that we can't even begin to fathom. They do it because it works out for them. They do it because it's fun. They do it because they can. They do it because they're bored. They do it for all kinds of reasons. So us trying to figure out why are they doing what they're doing is an exercise in crazy making and futility, because we will never know, because they don't think like a normal person does. Like normal people will lie if they're uncomfortable with the truth for some reason. You know, we lie about the weight on our driver's license. We lie about, we volunteered to watch our sister's kids for the weekend, but now we really don't want to. So we lie and say that we're sick. People lie for reasons like that when they're not comfortable with the truth. We tell our boss we were caught in traffic, but really we woke up late. That kind of stuff. Pathological personalities, they lie because they can, they lie because it's fun, they lie to see how much they can get away with. There's so many reasons. So I would just assume that everything that comes out of their mouth is a lie, and I wouldn't even try to begin to untangle that, to sort out which piece of the lie. It's like having a cake. It's like mixing arsenic in a cake and trying to figure out, okay, which piece is not poisoned. Like probably all of it's poisoned, right? And we can try to cut around the pieces that look more toxic than others, but to me, it's not worth it. Missouri Cowboy says, I want to be a therapist when I grow up. What suggestions would you give me? I would say I would start by contacting I don't know. I don't know how far out in the middle of nowhere you live, but you could start by contacting like your local university and seeing what master's programs they have and what all would be involved. So, and there's different types. Like you can do a master's in social work. You could do a master's in counseling for becoming like I just love, what is the word? Like a LPC, like a licensed professional counselor. You can get a master's in psychology. There's many different routes to becoming a therapist. So yeah. But I would start there. Start with calling some local programs and seeing what they would require. Okay, Kiara, great question. Says Dana, how can I tell my gut feelings from my paranoia? Okay, great question. I think that's something that all of us struggle with. And I guess the answer would be practice. So that's part of the answer. Okay. So maybe another part of the answer is getting really in tune with how you feel when you feel safe, when a person feels emotionally safe. So think about a person, if you have somebody in your life that you feel emotionally safe around. So for example, for me, that person is my brother. I've known him my whole life. I trust him. He's a good guy. I don't second guess his intentions or because not just because he's my brother, but because we have open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. Our relationship is built on mutual trust and support. Um, and we respect each other, so those foundational pieces are in place. And so we have that good rapport. We have a good relationship with each other. I feel safe around him. I can open up and tell him anything, and he can do the same with me. So I know how I feel when I'm around him. I feel very grounded. I feel supported. I feel he's good people. He's somebody that I can feel safe with sharing my hopes and my dreams and concerns and all of these things. So think about, okay, do you have a person like that in your life? And so starting there, if you can kind of get that baseline for like, okay, this is how I feel around this person. I feel calm. I feel empowered. It's noticing that you're feeling all of these like pleasant emotions. I feel supported. I feel nurtured. I feel empowered. I feel safe. I feel secure. I feel loved. I feel good, calm. I have peace, feeling good. I'm on that side of the spectrum. And then thinking about, how do you feel when you've been around a manipulative or abusive person? Oftentimes the exact opposite, right? You feel anxious, you feel like you're walking on eggshells, you feel nervous, you feel unhinged, you feel jealous, you feel insecure, you feel needy, you feel fearful, you feel depressed, you feel um, scared, you feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You feel it's all of these unpleasant emotions. So it's two very different sets of emotions, right? And appropriately so, because these are two very different sets of people and two very different sets of experiences. So once you realize, okay, once you can get in tune with, this is how I feel when I feel emotionally safe. This is how I feel around emotionally safe people. And this is how I feel when I'm around emotionally unsafe people. So once you know what it's like to feel emotionally safe, then if you're going through life and you start feeling those feelings of confusion, because that's kind of the first step of manipulation, right? A person's doing something and it's that initial feeling of, wait, what? You feel knocked off balance. Maybe that's the first sign. You feel knocked off balance. Like, did that person just say that? Did this just happen? And then it's followed with confusion and then introspection. Is it me? Am I making a big deal out of this, or is it them? Or is this weird, or is it just me? And you're confused. So knocked off balance, confusion, introspection, uncertainty, and then it kind of progresses, right? The anxiousness, the walking on eggshells, all of that, it just gets progressively worse. So if you can realize, okay, that you don't feel this way all the time, you tend to just feel like a panicky, unhinged, nervous mess around unsafe people, then it can help you develop that confidence of it's not just you, it's a lot of it's who the people that you've been around. I will say though, when a person starts waking up to this and like the gal said earlier tonight, she's like, you know what? I just got rid of the last friend in my life. I had to do a whole house cleaning. I had a bunch of really toxic people in my life, and I'm starting over. That's very common. And so when a person starts kind of waking up to this and they're like, oh my God, my ex was abusive. My mother was abusive. I've got a few coworkers that are abusive. Oh my God. I think a lot of my friends in my life are total jerks. And it's very common for a person to start wondering, well, wait a minute, is it me? Am I just being hyper vigilant? Am I just seeing problematic people everywhere? Am I seeing narcissists everywhere? What's my problem? And I would say the vast majority of the time, there is no problem. What's going on is you're waking up. You're seeing behavior clearly for the first time ever. And it's terrifying. It's sort of like you start realizing, oh my God, there's vampires walking around. Like I didn't even know vampires existed, and they're all around me. So it can be really overwhelming at first to start realizing. But I think too, so it's very common for a person to come across like the terms like narcissist or sociopath or psychopath, and it's this wake up call of, oh my God, these vampires exist. They're walking around, and oh my God, it's terrifying. And then they start looking at the world in very kind of black or white terms. A person's either a narcissist or they're normal. And then that can cause a lot of confusion, because then they start trying to figure out, okay, but even still, this is totally normal. It's totally normal for you to feel this way. They start trying to navigate like, well, is this person like a narcissist? Like, is there a line in the sand where they're a narcissist, or are they just a normal person with a lot of bad behavior? Like, do they just normally cheat and lie and manipulate and confuse and cause me mental anguish, and I'm walking on eggshells? And is that just like normal problematic? And then over time, hopefully, they come to the realization that there's not just these two types of people, that there's actually a third type. So there's like toxic people, and then there's quote unquote normal people, and then there's the third group, which is healthy. And that's the group to aim for. And that's the group to aim for us to become as well, right? That's the zone we want to be in. Your life will work in the healthy zone. That's when things start to work, because normal is just different shades of dysfunction. And depending on who you're around, that if it's normal for people to lie and cheat and steal and drink and, you know what I mean, and do all kinds and live in craziness, then that's normal, but it's not healthy. It's still a big problem if that's the way that they're living, chaos and, drama and dysfunction. That's normal, but it's not healthy. So that's kind of the third, I think, step, is understanding, okay, there's those three types of people. And then you're slowly starting to see that behavior there's a lot of shades of gray in there. And it's more about us turning inward and examining, okay, where are our deal breakers? Where are your deal breakers? What is workable for you? And a big part of that is learning to tune into your emotions. And I'll tell you, I mean, for me, one of the biggest game changers I've made in my life, because like I was saying earlier, I used to be the person, I would hang on until I couldn't hang on anymore. And I thought everything was workable, especially if somebody was nice to me, at least 50% of the time. I thought, well, this is totally workable. We have such good times together. This can be saved. I just need to triple up on my communication and get through to them so that we can work together towards a solution. And that was a problem. So one of the game changers for me was realizing I needed to become a lot more choosy about who I was keeping in my life, and especially about who I was keeping in my inner circle. And I also needed to back up my deal breakers, because my deal breakers, I thought I had good boundaries. Okay. And I didn't. So my boundaries, my deal breakers were like way off in the distance. I mean, things had to get really bad for me to have them as a deal breaker. And I used to think, the old me used to think that people that had really tight boundaries and deal breakers, I used to think that they were mean and judgmental and too harsh. The new me does not think that at all. I see that as having really healthy boundaries. And I think that they are spot on. And guess what? Their life works for them. So the new me starts distancing myself if situations become perpetually confusing and if there's mental anguish at all involved. If I'm caught up in that, if I'm feeling knocked off balance, and if I'm feeling confused, if I'm wondering, is it me or is it them or what's going on? All of that, I'm done. I don't even try to work on it. It's just not even worth it. I don't have that dynamic with the vast majority of people in my life. It's only been with toxic people. And so, it's like you smell the smoke before you see the fire. Like that's the smoke. So this takes practice. This takes practice. And so if you can go slow and if you can practice with people, with interacting with people in ways that you're not so emotionally invested. That's why I'm a big fan of meetup groups, because it's a bunch of random people. People come and go. I think it's a great way for those of us that struggle with feeling bad and guilty if we don't want to see somebody again. People come and go in meetup groups all the time. So you can go, you can have an amazing time with people, and you can even still at the end of that day realize, you know what, hey, these people were nice, but they're not my people. And I don't know if I really want to go back. And there's not a lot of guilt associated with that, because that's just how meetup groups are. It's kind of whoever's doing something that Thursday or whatever, they get together and they do that. And there isn't this expectation of, now you're one of us, you need to be here every week kind of a thing. So practicing interacting with people, practicing people watching, practicing paying attention to how you feel, writing this stuff down too is very telling, because it's so difficult. It's a new skill, and any new skill takes practice. And as you're navigating the waters of this, you're probably going to find yourself caught up in a lot of that self-doubt. Like, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but my new coworker, Betsy, she's something else. Like I feel like she's really stirring the pot, or I feel like she's really icy every time I come into work, and I can't really pinpoint why, but she has all the emotional warmth of an iguana. Like, I just don't feel comfortable around her, and it can be easy to doubt yourself and to be like, oh, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's my PTSD. Maybe I have issues with friends or with people or with men, or you know what I mean? Like, whatever. If you can write it down, because odds are you're spot on about Betsy being problematic and not your people. And then odds are, 6 weeks, 6 months, a year from now, that situation's going to come to a head. And then you can flip back and be like, see, you're not crazy. Like, you were picking up on stuff from day one, but it's hard for us to believe because so many of us want that concrete proof. We wait for the Betsy's of our life to become like really problematic, to where we're like, okay, this is not working for me. Now I got to go. But there's that smoke there that's long there before the fire starts. Bonnie liked my example of the iguana. Well, let's see. Yes, absolutely. Kana says, another way to put it, trauma is a normal response to unhealthy people and an unhealthy situation. You are normal. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. You're having a very normal response to a very abnormal situation. There'd be something wrong with you if you didn't feel this way. So, I always get concerned with people when they're, if they're like, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine, I'm totally great. Then I'm like, oh, really? Are you? Because I've experienced this, I think, more so with my guy friends, especially if something major's happened. And they don't, they just put on that happy face. I think that's such a thing for so many men in our society, where they've been so taught to not talk about feelings and not talk about what's going on. I think a lot of them don't even know how. I've got a guy friend of mine right now. Here's an example, kind of an extreme example, who has been struggling with like debilitating headaches to the point where he's thinking of getting a procedure to burn off some of the nerves because they're so bad. And he's tried all kinds of things and he just has all these headaches. Well, the doctor had asked him, okay, on a pain scale of like 0 to 10, 10 being the worst pain you've ever felt in your life, 0 being no pain at all, where are you? And he doesn't have that mind body awareness at all. And he's like, I don't know. And she's like, okay, well, when I gave you these, like cortisone shots to help with the pain, did the pain go down? He's like, well, yeah, I guess it did go down like a little bit, but I don't know. I don't know. And it's like, okay, well, how long does the pain stay lessened? He's like, well, I don't know. And he just didn't know. He just didn't know so many things. And our other friend, his girlfriend, kept saying, she's like, how do you not know? Like, this is so strange to me. Like, how do you just not know? But it's like, if you've been your whole life never been able to express things that were going on with you, then it's amazing. Even at a physical level, on a pain level, people still won't know. It's amazing how out of tune we can get with ourselves. But the good news is our inner self is always there. It's just we have to kind of turn up the volume and get used to listening to it again. Okay. Let me see. Let me scroll up here. Sue, I'm not quite sure if I understand your question. She says, is not calling or texting back a narcissistic behavior? I mean, it depends on context. So with a manipulative person, it can be a form of control, like punishing a person. But on the other side of the coin, it can also be a survival technique. If we go no contact with the manipulative person, if we instantly go no contact and we're not calling or texting them back, it's not to punish them. It's not to try to control them or manipulate them, or it's not, we're doing that because we don't want to be involved in the game. Like, we're just done, because any further communication that we have with a manipulative person isn't going to add any clarity. Like, there's no benefit to continuing to play the game. So that's why, on our side of the coin, that's why if we go no contact, it tends to just be like, you cut the cord, you're just done. There's no explaining it. There's no justifying about it. There's no arguing about it. There's no back and forth. There's no texting. There's no phone calls. It's just, I'm done. We might not even say we're done. We might just block and delete. And then we know in our minds we're done. But a narcissist, it's very common for them, if you challenge them, if you question them, if you disagree with them, if they're cheating, to all of a sudden kind of ghost a person. They're not texting, they're not calling back, or they're picking fights, that kind of thing. And then they're not texting or not. It's just craziness. Like, it's just all these different levels of craziness. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Let me scroll down here. Truth Seeker says, yes, I don't want normal. I want healthy. Yes. And that's the thing too with, hold on. Sorry, getting caught up in chat stuff here. with healthy is it goes back to knowing yourself. So what, I think there's certain like common denominators as far as like what healthy is. Like I was saying earlier, open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication, that mutual trust and support, um, that level of teamwork, that person is emotionally safe because they've proven themselves to be emotionally safe. Trust, an appropriate level of trust has been earned over a consistent period of time. So those are kind of the foundations for healthy. But then on top of that, so that's like the cake, okay? The icing on that cake is going to be individual things that make you you. So let's say you're really big into music, or football is your life, or fishing is your life, or things that just make you you. I'm really big into writing. So whoever's in my life, I spend large chunks of time alone. And I obviously I need to, because if I'm writing, I got to focus and concentrate. And so that's not easy for everybody to be around, you know? So a healthy environment is going to be somebody that understands and supports that about me. And if they have their own things about them, if it's a good fit, then I would be able to understand and support them in whatever it is that they're doing. So that sense of mutuality. It's a give and it's a take, and in healthy ways, right? So, but it really comes back to just knowing yourself. And like if it's a win-win kind of situation, then it's a nourishing environment for you both. And that's the ideal. That's what we should be shooting for. And that comes also with, having healthy boundaries, having each person having healthy boundaries, and each person understanding how to communicate effectively. And that stuff takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes time and practice as friends or as coworkers or as a significant other, of kind of getting on the same page and working as learning to really work as a team is kind of what it boils down to. Okay. Um, let's see. Scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up. Interesting. Gigi says, my covert narcissist uses the boys don't cry mentality as an excuse for his behavior. Yeah. And I don't like that either, because then I guess my response would be, okay, boys don't cry, but men don't abuse. So like, where does that leave us? Like there's no excuse for abuse. And adults, and I wouldn't even say like men don't abuse, like adults don't abuse. Like it's not an adult, it's not a responsible, appropriate, mature response to stress and frustration and anger and getting your needs met. Like adults don't throw temper tantrums, So there's bigger problems afoot if an adult is having a meltdown and treating other people around them terribly. Like it's just not okay. Oh, I love that, Maria. Maria says, the thing that helped me with trusting my gut instinct is not asking my gut to explain further, give proof for more examples. I listen easily and we get along beautifully now. That is so well said. I absolutely love that. Yeah, I think one of the hardest things with listening, tuning into your gut, is with so many other things in life, we have cause and effect. You touch a hot stove, you get burned, right? Cause, effect. When we listen to our gut, we don't have that. If we listen to it early enough, we will never know the effect because we've avoided it. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is because it seems like we're overreacting because we don't have that cause and effect. We know something's wrong. We're like, well, I'm not really sure if I should react. The stove is hot and I want to touch it, but we don't have that feedback of getting burned. Like it's almost like we need to get burned in order to be like, okay. People do this across the board. One of the best books I ever read about this, I think he is so spot on, is The Gift of Fear. And I wouldn't read that book if you're already feeling, I think you need to be at a pretty good solid place in your healing to read that book, because he goes into some graphic detail about some pretty horrific stories where people have been brutalized. But he talks about that, basically it's your intuition, and that there's certain signs like early on when a person can slow things down and rewind things, and they're like, that's what was off. It was that funny feeling. One of the stories he gives in there is a woman, and I won't go into brutal detail, just go into the beginning of it, but she pulled into her apartment complex, and I might have details wrong, so just bear with me here. But she pulled into her apartment complex and noticed that the garbage, or maybe it was her house. No, it was the apartment complex. Pulled into her apartment complex. The garbage can was not where she left it. And well, actually, let me back up. This woman contacts Gavin DeBecker, and he's helping with some sort of crime analysis or something or other. And they're trying to figure out, they're going back to the crime, and the woman had initially said, I don't know, like he seemed like a nice guy. I don't know how things got to this level. I don't know how this ended up happening. And then they began replaying it, and so it started off like there was that first funny moment of like, you know what, that's not where I left it. And then the guy had followed her into the apartment complex, into her building, and was very insistent about letting him help her with groceries. And she just wasn't comfortable about that. And then sure enough, he forced his way into her apartment. So little things like that. Here's another example in my own life. This was fairly recent. I was out walking my friend's dog. I was house sitting for them about 2 weeks ago. And I was walking the dog around the block. And this I had my headphones in. I was listening to music. It was a small town during the middle of the day on a weekend, seemingly, like innocent enough kind of environment. And this older guy comes out of his house and starts walking down the driveway. Well, I don't know. He's, I guess, trying to talk to me, but I don't see this because I've had my headphones in. And I'm walking the dog, and I realized, I don't know what I didn't realize that he was coming towards me. And then once it became apparent he was coming towards me, I pulled out my headphones, and he said something like, oh, hey, can I pet your dog? Or something like, I didn't realize he said that at first. It was something like, oh, that's a nice dog, or something like that. And I was just kind of nodding, and he had a pair of scissors in his hand too. That was the other thing that was a little uncomfortable. And he kept walking towards me. And so he's like, can I pet your dog? And so I let the dog, the whole situation just gave me the creeps. And it was one of those times where I'm like, is this me? Is this him? Is this the situation? Or is it my PTSD? Am I being hypervigilant? And of course, all of this is happening so quickly, right? And so I let the dog, because now he's already like moved in on the dog and is petting the dog, and he's trying to talk to me. And I let the leash go out. It was one of those extended leashes. And I just kind of kept walking, and I was smiling and nodding. I was like, yeah, it's a great day. Have a great day. And I could tell he was wanting to talk to me, and he was trying to get closer to me, but I wouldn't let that. I was controlling the pace of the interaction. And for like a split second, I felt a little bad. Like, oh, Danny, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Like, this guy is, probably 20 something years older than you. And, you're being paranoid. But it's like, it's okay to err on the side of caution. And so I kind of pulled the dog away and was just very quick of like, okay, have a great rest of your day. The thing is, I'll never know. Did he mean harm to me? I don't know. I'll never know. And that's okay that I'll never know, because erred on the side of caution. I'd rather not know and err on the side of caution than to continue to let him set the pace and me go along with it out of obligation or fear of seeming rude or guilt of like, oh, maybe this guy is lonely and this is a cute dog and oh my gosh, maybe I'm just being mean. Like, these are my boundaries, and it made me uncomfortable, and that's all that matters, is it made me uncomfortable. I don't need to wait around for him to prove me right that he was actually a weirdo or had some sort of bad intent. If you've waited to that point, then you've waited too long. So, okay. Erica saying, I need some healthy minded people to hear me out about this guy I just started seeing, please. Okay, go for it, Erica. Erica says, okay, I've been on 2 dates with this guy. There's a snowstorm in our area, and he messaged me yesterday saying how fun it would be if we got snowed in together. I messaged him that it would be fun. All along, I thought he was joking. It was hypothetical because he is away in a town a few hours away for training. He said that he was going shopping and asked if I wanted anything. I responded with a few items that I was craving, again, thinking that it was a joke. He later sent me a picture of every item that I mentioned. Okay, hold on. Did I miss part of it? Scrolling. Okay, I missed some part of it. What am I missing here, Erica? Hold on. Says, okay, I stopped messaging him for the entire day. I sent him a fun picture of my roses collection not too long ago. And again, he gave me a short response. Oh, wait, no, I missed more to the story. Oh, and there's something going on with the chat. Hold on here. Okay, Dandelion Green's your moderator now. Maria, you're now a moderator. What is, I don't know what all's going on in the chat. Okay, Erica was saying, okay, so with this guy, it sounds like he was kind of coming on strong. Then he was saying, oh, it wasn't a joke, that he mentioned, but I mentioned to him that we had never discussed me coming over. For example, he never gave me the address. I never said that I was on my way, etc. He maintained it wasn't a joke. So, but then now things have gotten brief and he seems irritated and things are uncomfortable. So, yeah. And then she says, okay, yeah, the more I think about it, I don't even plan on contacting him again. Okay, Truth Seeker, you're a moderator. Okay, Missouri Cowboy, you're moderator. You guys got some moderators in now. So I'm not sure what all's going on, but if somebody needs to go in timeout for a little bit or what have you. Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay, Wildflower. Just made you a moderator too. So no pressure, by the way, for those of you like that I just made a moderator. If you see something, if you want, if you're comfortable handling it, go for it. If you're not, then that's fine too. So no pressure. So Erica, yeah. I think one of the biggest things with relationships is seeing how people, you don't really know a person until you have a fight with them or a disagreement. And also I would say you don't really know a person until you see them under stress, or how they handle stress, how they handle frustration, how they handle being sick, and how they handle disagreements. Those are like four really telling things about the kind of person that you're dealing with, because it's everybody, pretty much everybody's enjoyable when they're in a good mood, right? And like when everybody's getting along, it's those four areas. How do they handle that? That's really telling. And so if things are kind of getting weird and you saying weird things and it seems like you can't get things back on track, then I would, at a minimum, like way slow things down and pay attention to that, because that is strange and that is uncomfortable and weird and confusing, and it just like doesn't even add up. Okay. Valenta says, I recommend the book You Should Have Known. It's a novel about a marriage counselor. I started reading it and it seems very interesting. I just got goosebumps reading the title. Yeah, I bet it would be interesting. Anybody can get tangled up in this stuff. It's one thing to have kind of clinical knowledge of anything, right? I mean, of anything, especially of abuse, but anything, whether it's, cancer, diabetes, abuse, alcoholism, when these kinds of things manifest in our own life, either within ourselves or within loved ones, it's, I think every single person is caught off guard by, how did I not see this? You know? And it's, a lot of it's the human brain. Like there's denial, there's a certain level of denial. And then there's a certain level of, it's so much this, I think everything in life, it's so much easier to see stuff in other people, right? Or like, well, sure, my wife drinks a lot, but not as much as the guy down the street, or not as much as my mother. And we're comparing and contrasting, and so it can be difficult for a person to see, like, okay, well, that may be, but that doesn't mean that your spouse doesn't have a drinking problem. Or do you see what I'm saying? Or abuse, like if you see abusive dynamics with other people, if they're worse than what we're going through, then it can be very easy to think, well, then to somehow for us to minimize, not even other people, for us to minimize what we're going through, thinking like, well, it's not that bad, or this is somehow workable. So yeah, it's interesting. Okay. Oh, let me scroll up here. Dandelion says, I don't know how to moderate. If you scroll, I'm so sorry to just trial by fire, huh? If you take your cursor and you scroll over like an inch or so, you're going to see three dots that come up. If you click on those, it'll give you some options. You can put somebody in timeout, you can remove them. there's a couple different options. Maria says, Maria, I made you a moderator. I just made like 5 or 6 people moderator really quick because I wasn't sure what was going on and whatever, but there's no pressure. So even though this has been thrust upon you guys, this position that you did not ask for, like I said, no pressure. Do not feel the need to to actually moderate. I just thought if somebody wanted to be able to stop what was going on in the chat, then you could. But if it's not something that you want the pressure of, I totally understand. Like, don't worry about it. There's no expectation with that. No worries. Oh, Bonnie says, I am honored. Well, thank you for being a good sport. And okay, let's see here. Sam says, yes, I failed at trusting my gut from the get-go, even though red flags were all over. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's, what's so interesting about this too is, this is cool. So today, like where you are today with understanding problematic behavior and with understanding red flags and like your intuition, where you're going to be in 6 months from now is very different. So like looking back on that, whatever situation brought you here today, you might look back on that and be like, yeah, you know what? I had some red flags, like some things were kind of weird and I glossed over it. In about 6 months from now, you're going to be like, man, you're not even going to get tangled up in something like that again because you see it so much more clearly. Whereas before, the old you was like, well, I don't know. Like, I mean, things can be justified and we can all justify anything. That's the danger in justification, is anything can be justified. So it's going slow, paying attention to how you feel, paying attention to your deal breakers. And it really boils down to going slow. The more emotionally invested we are in a situation or a person, the harder it is to see things clearly. And that really, especially if people are having sex right away, if they're spending a lot of time together right away, it's really easy to develop this feeling of like, man, this person's so amazing. They feel like my best friend. They feel like a soulmate. And it's that false sense of intimacy when really we don't know that person that well. So, it can be just going slow is a huge part of steering clear of like so many problematic situations. Okay. James, I'm gonna make you a moderator too. Missouri Cowboy says, and I don't know how to moderate either. Oh, trial by fire. Oh, it's going to be so fun. Everybody's going to be trying to figure it out. Chaos will ensue. We'll get through it. We will get through it, guys. Valenta asks, how did the narcissist you knew treat you when you were sick? So, okay, here's the thing with that. So, narcissistic people, if we're talking like selfishness, it depends. All of these different traits can come out differently in different people. I've known, like, I would say the true narcissists in my life were awful. They were incredibly selfish. They were indifferent. It was the weirdest thing. Like, if they weren't in pain, like they completely lacked that level of empathy. If I was hurting, but because they didn't understand that. It was the same across the board. Going on road trips. Like if you're like, I really got to go to the bathroom, it didn't compute. It was like, well, what do you mean? I don't have to go to the bathroom, so we're not going to stop. It's like, yeah, but we don't share a bladder. Like I've got to go to the bathroom, it was all about them all of the time. Like they just really didn't understand they could not put themselves in other people's positions at all. It was very bizarre. So if I was sick, if they weren't sick, they didn't understand like why I didn't feel well and why it was so inconvenient, kind of a thing. The sociopaths in my life, the more I was, or covert narcissists, those people tended to be incredibly charming, doting, thoughtful, but it was more that it was just another layer of their game. So it was all about, they didn't, it's not that they liked being good to me in that way. It was like I think it was like that they would be good to me. Well, I think because it kept me roped in. I mean, especially with Jack. But it was also, I think, that they didn't love me. They loved that I was in love with them. So they would do good things for me, but it was always for that. It was a weird backdoor kind of way for them to get all of that admiration, and it was ego gratifying for them. But it's weird. I don't even know if that makes sense. Like there wasn't any real bond there, even though it felt like it. And probably to an outsider, they would have been like, wow, you're so lucky to have this person who's so doting. But none of it was the intentions were all wrong. Does that make sense? Like it just wasn't normal and healthy and sincere. Yeah. W says, my ex claimed he suffered more by watching me in labor than I did giving birth to a 9-pound, 10-ounce baby with no epidural. Yeah, that kind of stuff is just jaw dropping, really. Like really? Like you want to try I guess what would the size difference be? It's like pushing a watermelon out your Brittany. It would be the same as like pushing like a coconut out his stuff, like it's like, no, dude, it's really like you think it's painful, but it's like it's for real painful. You don't want to try that. Okay. Last Miranda asks, a friend of mine is currently in a toxic relationship, and although she's aware of many bad things, she keeps legitimizing them. How can I help her? Oh, that is such a good question, and it's such a difficult one. I think the hardest thing is when people are in any situation, especially toxic ones, where they don't want to leave, they're going to continue justifying why they should stay. And you probably already experienced this with your friend. There's a lot of going back and forth. There's a lot of coming to you and being like, this, he's doing X. He's lying, he's cheating. Can you believe this? He's such a jerk. And then you think, okay, she's finally seeing the light. She's come around, and then she'll come back to you. And then all of a sudden they've somehow made up. Right. And then maybe she's not coming around so much anymore because she doesn't want to talk about it because she's feeling embarrassed or judged or like hypersensitive. She just doesn't want to talk about her relationship because to outsiders, they're like, wait, what? What do you mean you're back with that guy? He's such a loser. What are you thinking? And then she feels shame and, embarrassment and all these feelings. But then she'll come back around again. It's like, you know what, you guys, you're right. This guy's a total loser. And, this time he stole money from me, said he'd repay me, and he did this and he did that. And then they make up again. Right. Or actually, I should say, then he manipulates her more again and gets her sucked back in. And she's caught up in this cycle, but she doesn't see it. She is seeing this in terms of, well, all relationships have normal highs and lows. And she's thinking that she's trying to justify it in her mind to make it that these are the highs and lows of a relationship, but they're not. These are the highs and lows of an emotionally abusive relationship or a manipulative relationship. This is not normal. So, or I should say, it's not healthy. might be normal, but it's not healthy. It's not workable. It's, toxic. So I think one of the things that you can do is put stuff back onto her. So if she comes to you and instead of, this is so hard to do and I still struggle with it. And, so I get it. But if she's coming to you and she's like, hey, you know what? He did this again and he's a jerk and because you're a friend, right? And you want to go beat him up because it's like, I can't believe he's treating you this way. And you want to defend her. But it doesn't help getting angry with him or getting angry with her. It'll just make her shut down even more. So I would just be there to listen and just keep reminding her like, honey, I love you. And I know you need to turn inward. I would start talking to her. Well, okay. There's my book, my first book, which is called Start Here. This is probably, I would literally start here. This is what the book looks like. You can find it on Amazon. It's going to be free on Amazon the 1st of April, the ebook version. So if you want to pick it up, then go for it. But this book, there's a whole section in here on how to talk to somebody who's in an abusive relationship. Things for mental health professionals, things for friends and family, kind of understanding what a person's going through that's in it. And then there's also a ton of terminology and examples. So this might be something that you would want to read, and it might be something, if you get the ebook version or the paperback version or whatever you end up doing, then giving it to your friend and just saying, hey, I came across this. I thought you might be interested. And if you can find certain words in here, like, I have a whole section of vocabulary. So like projection, gaslighting, trying to think of some other words that are going to fit. There's the whole cycle of an emotionally abusive relationship, a narcissistically abusive relationship, these kinds of things. Odds are once she hears a few of these terms, like love bombing, like projection, like gaslighting, crazy making, things are going to start to make sense and she's going to want to know more. So giving her a book, maybe even encouraging her, hey, there's this lady on YouTube. She does this thing every Wednesday night. I think, you might find it helpful just to listen. And then that way she's around other people who aren't judging and who have been there, done that, and getting that validation of, no, you're not crazy. And also this book too, the Start Here book, there's a whole section in the back of frequently asked questions. And there is, hold on a second. All the questions that people tend to ask of what is the difference between a narcissist and a selfish jerk? And how do I know for sure that they have narcissistic personality disorder? And could I be a narcissist and not know it? This is very common because people are normally targets of abuse are being blamed. I'm not the narcissist. You are. You're a narcissist. You're abusive. You're manipulative. You're controlling. When in reality, all they're doing is they're standing up to the abusive person. So that question's in there. There's the difference between a narcissist's problematic behavior and normal problematic behavior. There's how can I tell if I'm in an abusive relationship? There's can a narcissist change? What if the narcissist is a parent or family member? How do I divorce or break up with a narcissist? Let's see what other questions I have in here. How do I leave a narcissist in a safe way? Did they ever love me? How do I go gray rock when they keep provoking me? How can I prevent getting sucked back in again? What if they don't hoover me? That's a very common concern. People think, well, narcissists, I always hear that narcissists hoover their targets, but if they don't hoover me, does that mean that they're not a narcissist? So that's a question. What do I do if they're threatening to hurt themselves? Probably the biggest question is it normal to miss an abusive ex? Then another question here, how did I get involved in a relationship like this? Okay, yeah, those were the frequently asked questions in this book. This is the book that I needed when I was going through everything. So it's like, it's an all-in-one thing. It's a really solid place to just be like, hey, you know what? Literally, like, just start here. Just start here. You're going to have probably more questions after this, but this is going to iron out a lot of the wrinkles right up front. But I think, being there. So back to your question, being there, being supportive, letting her know that you love her, and that she will have the clarity that she'll know what to do when the time is right. And I think just validating her. So the more she feels comfortable that you're an emotionally safe person to open up to, and that you're not going to judge her, that she's not going to feel embarrassed or shamed or stupid or any of these things, for wanting to go back, for missing him, for all of those things, then she's going to continue to open up. So it's a tough spot to be in as a friend, because it can be crazy making and draining to be on, to try to support a person, because there are so many makeups and breakups, and it's that cycle over and over and over and over again. And when you're on the outside of it, you're like, my goodness, it's too much. Like, this is too much chaos, and I can't handle it anymore. And that's very normal too. So, there's a lot of support groups out there. There's one on my website. I have a Facebook group. That's one. There's people, you can Google narcissistic, different support groups. I always encourage people, join a handful and see kind of which groups resonate with you the best. And, it's helpful to hear from other people that have been through it. So I hope that helps. Oh, A&M says, what book did you hold up? This is my book. It's called Start Here. And you can find me on Amazon. Dana Morningstar is my name. So I have 2 books out. I don't know where my other book is. I need to clean my office. I have another book. So I have this book called Start Here, and then I have another book called Out of the Fog. So my Start Here book has all of the terms. It has frequently asked questions, how to do a safety plan, what else is in here? Cycle of narcissistic abuse, finding a good support group and a therapist, how to help somebody in an abusive relationship, strategies to help you move forward. What is a narcissist and what is a personality disorder? It starts the book off with who this book is for. And chapter 1 is, I'm not sure I belong here, which is, I think, what everybody says. Because they're not quite sure what's going on. So they don't want to overreact or think that they're involved in something that they're not. So I hope that this book is as helpful as I had intended it to be. So this book is the basics, the terminology and stuff. My second book, Out of the Fog, I wrote this past year, and that was more on what I realized kind of the second layer to this is other stuff people began getting stuck on. So for example, like I was talking about earlier, there's the difference between intensity and sincerity, and love bombing and love, and trauma bonding and healthy bonding, and a parent and a predator, commitment and codependency. So a lot of these, from the outside, if you're not dealing with a manipulative person, it can be hard to kind of tell what's what, And so that book really separates them out. What's the difference between a friend and a person being friendly? A lot of people experience that, where they've got this abusive person who now all of a sudden wants to be friends. And now they're confused of like, well, can I be friends with my abusive ex? Like, is that going to work? But this person is really mean to me, but maybe they won't, like they get lost in that fog. So that the second book is all about sorting out this from that. And it just really I tried to make it as clear and concise as possible about the differences between the two. Because then once you see it, because people are in that fog because they're still in that manipulation. But if you can, it's like manipulation, when you shine a light on it, it just kind of evaporates. Manipulation can't exist. Darkness can't exist when there's clarity. It can't exist when there's light. And so when you start separating this stuff out and you get that clarity, you're like, yeah, like you can't unsee it. Like you get it. So, and it also brings to light, and there's maybe about 50 or so concepts in that second book that I compare and contrast. And so it's a great, I think the second book is really great because it just is a good way to go through and see if there's any other kind of wrinkles in your thinking. So again, this any lessons in either one of these books has been very hard learned and hard earned on my part, especially the second book, because it was so many different small thoughts that I had that was just getting me off in the bushes because I wasn't taking into account manipulative or abusive people. And when you have that kind of personality in the mix, everything changes. And it's really important for a person to get crystal clear on the differences between, stuff like that, between a person actually being a friend and a person just being friendly. Sincere versus insincere, and learning the differences there. It's interesting too to read the reviews. Well, thank you. Last Miranda says, I have both of your books. They are so helpful and well written. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. I just realized I just picked up my Start Here book and I just caught 2 little formatting issues. Oh, it never ends. I tell you, it's so crazy. You go through a book multiple times, dozens. I mean, I went through this book. I couldn't even tell you how many times. And I had my mother helped catch any typos, and I had an editor. And there's still stuff in here. So it's just frustrating. Okay. That's a really great point to add on to that, Maria. She says, what's worked for her as far as like slowing things down with a new person is not seeing somebody more than twice a week. I don't have long phone conversations. I just have them to make plans. I don't get deep. I keep it fun and playful. Yeah, that's huge. Because it goes back to you setting the pace, right? And like not like jumping into the whirlwind and not like contributing to the whirlwind. I think a lot of us, myself included, the old me, I'll speak for myself because I don't want to speak for anybody else, but the old me used to it was so fast of like, man, this person's so awesome. I just want to spend like every single day with them. And I would just jump into that like head first. And it was great until it became not great. And then I would be so emotionally invested in a person, like just so quickly. It was crazy. And spent hours and hours and hours talking and texting. And even still, I mean, it's taken me a lot of practice to really break that. And there's still times where I'll fall into that, but I'm able to catch myself a lot more and just be like, Dana, just don't. Like, you need to value your time, value your energy, value your emotions. Like, just don't just, even if you've got nothing better to do that night, you're totally bored, realize that it just, you're just so much better off going slow, So I like that. No more than twice a week. And keeping it surface level is huge. Oh my goodness. Jennifer says, my narcissist apologized for his sexual abuse a couple times in Christmas cards while I was no contact, but he never said specifically for what. Should I focus on that or should I take the apology? Well, at a minimum, I would remain no contact. I mean, I think when a person's behavior falls under the category of like egregious, this is deal breaker stuff, physical abuse, sexual abuse, um, really any abuse, but that kind of stuff is way outside the realm of workable or tolerable or allowable. So, the fact that he didn't own his behavior is a big red flag right there, that there's still no accountability for it. And even still, the whole sending an apology about that when you're no contact in a Christmas card, that's so, to me, that's so disrespectful. It's like, here, let me bring up a really painful thing that I did at a really joyous time of year. And knowing that it's either going to have one of two, it's going to be received by you in one of two ways, right? Either it's going to really upset you, or it's going to make you feel some sort of sympathy or false connection to him, being like, oh, well, he apologized. So it's Christmas. It's the season of forgiving, right? Like, you know, if it were me, I would just completely cut ties. Like, what he did was way over the line of, this is not somebody that you ever want in your life. Like, this is a dangerous person, and you would be wise to take action to never have contact with that person again if you can at all help it. So no, I wouldn't take that as a sincere apology. And I would stay no contact. It's all just another level of manipulation with these people, That's what I vote for. Yep. Sherry says he probably did that because he was probably needing attention at Christmas. Yeah. Alexa asks, how long can somebody live with the negative effects of having a narcissist in their life as a significant other? What are the effects? And I think you're asking, can becoming a narcissist be one of those effects? So real quick, and then we'll do our kind of grounding meditation thing. How long can somebody live with the negative effects of having a narcissist in their life as a significant other? I think there's been lots of people that have lived with it their whole life. That's all they've ever known. They had a parent or parents that were narcissistic. They then got married to somebody who was a total nightmare, and that's all they've ever known. And they stay that way. So, a person can live with a really problematic, toxic spouse to the day they die. It's not so much length of time. I think it's more of quality of life kind of a thing. But even with that said, I don't want anybody to think that, okay, you leave and then things are going to be easy. Even leaving a situation like this, it's going to have its own set of challenges. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows leaving. But you can plan, if a person's in a situation like that, definitely anticipating change is always difficult, even if it's needed, even if it means leaving an abusive relationship, it's always difficult. So preparing for that, anticipating for that, and then kind of shoring up your dam as much as you can to prepare for that goes a long way. So getting a solid support system in place, even if you've got friends and family, if you're thinking about leaving, that can support you, or even finding things to do and people to know through meetup groups, doing what you can to get as much support as you can during that time. So what are the effects of staying with an abusive spouse? PTSD in a nutshell. Exhaustion, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, inflammation, anger, rage, feeling jealous, unhinged, needy, scared, fearful, anxious. I think anxiety and depression are probably the two big ones. Just feeling frazzled, just feeling fried, feeling like you're way older than you are, just worn out. You feel toxic. Like you feel like you've been poisoned, in a lot of ways, because you kind of have been being around the toxic person for that long. They just suck the energy out of the room. And then becoming a narcissist can be one of those effects. So it's very common, trauma in general is transformative. So people, we all handle different traumatic events in different ways. And when a person has been under that kind of, oh God, it just like wears me out even thinking about when a person has been under like that level of manipulation and pressure and craziness for so long, they tend to get to a point where they, that unprocessed frustration tends to lead to hostility at some point. It's sort of like, you can yell, even with animals, right? Like you don't even need to beat a dog in order for it to become mean. If you're yelling at a dog and you're intimidating a dog, there does tend to come a time where then that dog all of a sudden bites back. And that's a term called reactive abuse. It's so like with people that have been in either verbally, emotionally, psychologically, physically, you name it, type relationships, any form of abusive relationship, they put up with it. They put up with it. Not, I shouldn't even say put up with it. They're manipulated into tolerating it. Okay. For a wide variety of reasons. They think they're to blame. They think that they're afraid to leave. You know, there's a mix of emotions. There's lots of reasons people stay. Okay. They stay, they stay, they stay. They're holding on to hope that things are going to change. You know, they're being manipulated. There's just all of these factors. They don't know how to leave. They're scared to leave. They don't know how to be alone. Like there's just like I said, there's a lot of factors at play. They get pushed into a corner and then they oftentimes do start to lash back out. And then when that starts happening, then they become scared. They're like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Is this somehow contagious? Because I feel like a very different person. I feel now I've become the abuser and now I'm lashing out and now I'm being hateful and hurtful. And this is not who I am, but I'm afraid that this is who I've become. And it's living under, it's a survival kind of defense that people tend to slip into over time, you know? So, and it takes a while, I think, for a person, even if they end that relationship, because they tend, and that's, there's so many things that are just at work here too, that but like the PTSD and feeling triggered and all of that, when they get out of these relationships, then you have to kind of work through learning to kind of moderate emotions, moderating your responses, understanding what it means to be triggered, that you're probably triggered by a lot of things in your environment, and to not lash out, So there's a lot of stuff to learn, there's a lot of stuff to unlearn, and there's a lot of stuff to relearn, I guess. So there's a lot to it, but it can be done. And there's a ton of, thankfully with the internet, there's a ton of support groups out there, and um, I don't know. I would really like to start working on building up a referral network of mental health clinicians. I know that there are, I'm sure, a lot out there that are fantastic. I mean, I've heard from other people like, yeah, I've got this amazing therapist or doctor or whoever. And I think it's, we have the technology. I think it's time to start circling the wagons and making this process. It's difficult enough as it is, like why not make this easier? So Alexa says, I came out of the situation angry, but I'm getting a lot better. But my natural empathy and love, I feel I may never get back and get back on track in my life. Well, okay, she says that we broke up in 2008. I left 4 years ago. I've not been the same since. That's very normal too. So it's the whole trauma is transformative. And I think another snag that people tend to get hung up on, myself included, is in thinking that healing means somehow going back to the way we were. But life is never about going backwards. It's always about going forward. Life is about growth. And so realizing, and I think there's a lot of freedom that can come from just knowing that, because if we are caught up, it's understandable if a person's like, oh my God, I'm just damaged, I'm broken goods, I don't know, like I'm so different than how I used to be. We have to kind of mourn the loss of who we were. But I think at the same time, it can really set you free and realizing it's okay that you're not who you were, because life is always about growth, and growth is about moving forward. And so here we are now, right? Like we had this traumatic event, and now we're like, well, I know who I was before, and I know who I was during all of this, and I know who I was after I got out of this crazy, awful relationship. And I just have been kind of in this holding pattern, because if you've been waiting to go back to that old person, then you're going to be waiting for a very long time, because that's not going to happen. But the cool thing is now you can start defining a new normal for you. Like you are the author of this book. You are the author of the book of your life. And so I think if you think about it and living your life in chapters of, okay, things are different, but different doesn't have to mean worse. So you can decide. It took me a while too. And there's still things that I'm sad about. Like, man, I used to, like, I was a lot more loving and had a much easier time, I think, bonding with people. And that makes me sad that that's gone. It's still there, but it's not anywhere near what it used to be. But in many ways, things are different. I feel like I've slowed things down. I feel like the way that I do bond with people and that I do connect with people is much more, well, it's real. I feel like I set the pace now, and it's sincere, and it's just so, I guess because it doesn't feel the same doesn't have to mean that it's bad or wrong. It's just different. Like I really was hung up for a long time with trusting people. I think most of us, right, had a really hard time trusting people. I was terrified to trust a person again. And then it was the realization of, oh, okay, well, one of the ways I was going wrong is I was trusting people right off the bat. I was taking everything that they told me for face value. And again, like you would think I would know better. And I did know better in a lot of ways, but I had a really hard time with applying that to my own life, especially when a person was nice. Like I just took them for face value, and I got burned time and time and time and time again. And it was sort of like, okay, I need to back things way up and slow things way down. And so now I don't view it. The old me used to view it as, okay, I've got trust issues. The new me views it as, no, I just never knew how to trust appropriately back then. So the new me moves much slower, but it's a lot healthier. But it doesn't seem that way to other people because they've never experienced what I've been through. And that's there's just so many pieces to this. But that's okay. Like they don't need to understand or agree with me or support that. Like, it's not healthy to totally trust a person right out of the gate. Like that's a sign of poor boundaries. But I didn't, it took me 40 years to realize that. Like I didn't know that. Or if I did know it, I didn't realize I was doing that. I didn't realize that it was as big of a problem in my life as it was. So it's defining a new normal. And really a lot of it is understanding that a lot of the way that we were before was out of alignment and it wasn't healthy. So you can get yourself back into alignment. Things are going to be a little different, but it's creating this new empowering new normal for you. And I think once you kind of get those pieces in place, especially with trusting, like going slow and trusting yourself enough to walk away when things start to get weird. you know? Like I was saying before, perpetual confusion, you're feeling knocked off balance, mental anguish, I'm out the door. Like I don't stick around and wait for them to prove me right. I'm out the door. I don't care. And once you can prove to yourself that you can trust yourself to walk away from problematic situations, then it's going to make trusting other people a lot easier because you're not putting all the responsibility onto them. You're not being like, please don't hurt me. I can't handle this again. I need you to totally just, I need to trust you completely. Like, please don't hurt me. Cause I mean, I know a lot of like myself included, like a lot of us were doing that. We're like, okay, well, I just need to, this other person has to just be, a solid, decent, good person, or else I'm going to be emotionally devastated. And the reality is, you know what? They're going to be what they're going to be. That's why it's important why we need to move slow. And then if things do take a turn for the worse, whether it's their personality, maybe they develop a drug addiction. Do you know what I mean? Or they become an alcoholic, or things happen, and we get to the point where we're like, you know what? I'm not going to be dragged through hell. I'm going to jump off because I'm only going to put up with this stuff for so long. Like they need to be responsible for themselves. If we can trust ourselves to keep ourselves safe, then it just, you reclaim your power by doing that, and then life and our relationships with other people become a lot easier. So, um, okay, let's see here. I like that. Maria was talking about getting deep, having deep conversations, and said, yeah, I used to get deep, deep, deep. I still get deep, but about positive topics. Yeah. I'm focused on my passions, healthy bonding. Does that make sense? Yeah. And that's a great way to do it. Like, I I used to view myself as an open book. And I guess in many ways I still am, right? Like on this YouTube channel and stuff, but it's different. Like I'm not this way with people that I don't know in my like in real life, right? Like in my personal life. I tend to take things really slow, and you know, I'm not an open book anymore. But so I didn't realize that was a sign of poor boundaries. Like just being a totally open book. So I thought, well, I have nothing to hide. So I would answer any question that anybody had for me. I would let them set the pace. It was just too much, and I didn't realize that was a problem. And I didn't realize there's just so many things. There's just so many things. I think one of my favorite books on boundaries is that book by Adeline Birch, the Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship. I think she just nailed it. It's a quick read. It took me maybe an hour, maybe, to read the book. And I just think she did such a great job. Just totally nails it. So if that's something that you're struggling with as far as like, well, how do I know? Like what are healthy boundaries and what are poor boundaries? And because even if you think you have great boundaries and that the only issue was that you had this manipulator come into your life, I guarantee you they've eroded your boundaries in ways you haven't even realized. So it's always good to kind of examine them and to see if you need to do a tune-up, because these people, they're slow and steady at what they do, and they really can do a number on a person. So, okay. Well, so with that said, let's take some time and get comfortable and just be in the moment. So find a comfortable spot, whether you are in a chair or lying down. Take a few deep breaths. In through your nose. And out through your mouth. being completely in this moment. Now bringing your attention to the top of your head, slowly scanning down, noticing and releasing any tension you might be holding in your forehead, in your eyebrows, in your eyes, in your cheeks, in your jaw. Letting your jaw fall open. As you do that, letting your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. Relaxing your neck, your shoulders, feeling the shoulders relaxed and with the weight of them, letting them just drop down a few inches. As you relax your shoulders, maybe roll them back a few times, allowing your chest to open. And relaxing your arms, your forearms, and your hands. Letting your hands fall in whatever position is the most comfortable. Relaxing your stomach, your hips, allowing your legs to fall in whatever position is the most comfortable for you. Relaxing your thighs, your knees, your calves, and your feet. Allowing your feet to fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. Continuing to breathe deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth. As you breathe in, visualize that breath being kind of a whitish, silvery, healing, restorative light. And as you breathe out any pain, stress, anxiety, tension, and visualize it as kind of a gray smoke. You might want to visualize, or you may find that you visualize different shades of gray with different breaths. Be focusing certain breaths on certain areas of your body that you are storing any of that pain, stress, tension. So breathing in this healing light. Breathing out any of that residual pain, stress, or anxiety. Blowing that gray smoke as far as you can away from your body. And if you notice that you are storing any pain, stress, or tension anywhere in your body, perhaps in your shoulders, your neck, your lower back, your jaw, with each inhale, sending that breath to each of those areas, allowing that healing energy to soften those areas. And then exhaling as much of that pain, stress, and tension as you can. And let's do that for the next 7 breaths. So each breath, sending that healing, restorative white light to any area in your body that you need it, and exhaling any stress, tension, or pain that you need to. And now visualize your body filling up completely with that beautiful, restorative, amazing white light. Let it expand effortlessly as it moves through your body, every inch of your body, surrounding every single cell in your body with that beautiful, healing white light. Let it repair and regenerate every single cell that it touches. Letting that light expand into the top of your head, down your arms, down your torso, down your legs, into your toes. All you can feel is that white light. Any pain, stress, or tension that's still in your body is being completely engulfed by that white light. Now turn your attention inward. You can feel that energy as it's moving through your body, pulsating in the palms of your hands and tingling down into the tips of your toes. Now let's take the next 7 breaths. Actually, let's do longer. Let's do 14. 14 breaths and send this light and love out to other people here in the chat or any other people in your life that you'd like to send some positive energy out to. Visualize giving them just a big energetic hug, letting them know that they matter and just how much they mean to you. So let's do that starting now for the next 14 breaths. And when you're ready, go ahead and come on back, making sure to give yourself a really big energetic hug, letting yourself know that you matter and that you are ready to treat yourself with value starting now in both big ways and small ways every single day. When you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Okay, so thank you guys so much for being here tonight and for joining me. And hopefully I'll see you. Angie and I are doing our live stream tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to go for an hour here on my channel. So hopefully I'll see you guys then. So thank you guys so much. As always, you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will see you guys soon. Okay. Good night.